My name is Hannah. I am 30 years old, and my family threw me away for my spoiled younger sister. My husband told me he could not keep lying to himself that my sister was the one he really wanted. I simply replied, "Then go be with her." 1 year later, I became the owner of the most successful high-end gym in Chicago. What my ex-husband did when he saw me happier than ever with my new fiancé still makes me die laughing. Before I tell you how I went from homeless in the freezing rain to building a fitness empire, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit the like button and subscribe if you have ever had to walk away from toxic people. Growing up, I was always the responsible one. I built a solid career in marketing, always paid my bills on time, and did everything right. My younger sister, Madison, at 26, was the exact opposite. She was the undisputed golden child of the family. My parents, Thomas and Catherine, bailed her out of every financial disaster and relationship drama she ever created. I always accepted my role in the background, thinking my hard work would eventually earn their respect. That illusion shattered completely on the night of my 5th wedding anniversary. I had spent the entire afternoon preparing a lavish dinner in our upscale Chicago condo. The scent of roasted garlic and rosemary filled the kitchen. I had set the dining table with our best silver-lit candles and poured 2 glasses of an expensive red wine. I was wearing a black dress Derek had complimented months ago. I wanted everything to be perfect. At 8 p.m., the front door finally opened. Derek walked in, brushing snow off his expensive wool coat. He was 32, a financial director who cared more about his image than anything else. He arrived completely empty-handed. There were no flowers, no anniversary card, not even an apology for being late. He did not take off his coat or greet me. Instead, he walked straight to the dining table, pulled a thick manila envelope from his briefcase, and dropped it right next to my wine glass. The heavy thud echoed in the quiet room. I looked at the envelope, then up at his face. His expression was completely blank, devoid of any warmth or guilt. "Those are divorce papers," he said, his voice flat and businesslike. "I have already signed my part. You need to review them and sign by Friday." I stared at him, my mind struggling to process the words. We had experienced our share of normal marital friction, but nothing that warranted this. On our anniversary, I managed to ask, my voice trembling slightly, "You are doing this tonight?" He crossed his arms, looking impatient rather than remorseful. "There is no good time for this, Hannah. I cannot keep lying to myself or to you. I am not happy in this marriage. I have not been for a long time." I stood up from the table, my heart pounding against my ribs. "Why? What happened?" Derek did not even blink. He looked me straight in the eyes and delivered the killing blow. "Your younger sister is the one I really want. We have been seeing each other for the past 6 months. Madison understands me in ways you never could. She actually needs me." The room seemed to tilt. My own sister. The girl I had grown up with, the girl I had protected and helped support, had been sleeping with my husband for half a year. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I wanted to scream, to throw my wine glass at the wall, to break down and cry. But I looked at Derek's smug face, waiting for me to fall apart, and something cold and hard snapped into place inside my chest. I refused to give him the satisfaction of my tears. "Then go be with her," I replied, my voice remarkably steady. Before Derek could respond, the sound of a key turning in the front door lock made us both turn. I had given my parents a spare key for emergencies years ago. The door swung open, bringing a gust of freezing wind into the condo. My parents, Thomas and Catherine, walked in. Hiding behind my mother, looking entirely too pleased with herself, was Madison. She was wearing a designer coat I recognized as a recent purchase Derek had claimed was a gift for his boss. They stepped into the living room, a united front of betrayal. They did not look surprised to see the divorce papers on the table. They did not look apologetic. The devastating truth hit me all at once. They knew. My entire family knew about the affair, and they had coordinated this ambush. Thomas stepped forward, taking charge just as he always did in his business meetings. "Hannah, let us handle this like adults," he said, adopting his authoritative tone. "We know this is a shock, but we need to focus on practicalities right now. You need to sign over your equity in this condo. I let out a harsh, disbelieving laugh. You break into my home to demand my property so my cheating husband and my sister can live here. Catherine moved to stand next to Madison, placing a protective hand on her arm. Madison is pregnant, Hannah. She needs a stable environment for the baby. You are strong. You have your marketing career. You can figure things out and bounce back. But Madison is delicate right now. We have to think about the child. They were rewriting reality right in front of me. They were turning my sister's affair into a noble cause and my eviction into a family duty. Madison peeked out from behind our mother, her eyes wide with a perfectly rehearsed, innocent expression. I did not mean for it to happen, Hannah, she said softly. We just fell in love. You were always so busy with your work. Derek needed someone who could prioritize him. I looked at the 4 people standing in my living room, the husband who had lied to me, the sister who had stolen from me, the parents who were currently throwing me out into the cold to protect their golden child. The injustice was staggering, but arguing with them was pointless. They had already made their choices and written their justifications. I turned my back on them and walked directly into the master bedroom. I pulled my oldest suitcase from the top shelf of the closet. I did not bother packing the expensive jewelry Derek had given me over the years, or the designer clothes my parents had bought for my birthday. I packed my oldest jeans, my warmest sweaters, my laptop, and my personal documents. When I walked back into the living room 10 minutes later, they were still standing there looking slightly unsure of my silence. I walked over to the kitchen island and dropped my set of house keys onto the granite counter. The metal clattered loudly in the tense silence. I looked at Derek, who was now standing next to Madison holding her hand. You two deserve each other, I said calmly. Enjoy the mess you have created. I did not wait for their response. I pulled my suitcase behind me, walked out the front door, and stepped into the freezing Chicago rain. I had no idea where I was going to sleep that night, and my bank accounts were about to reveal a terrifying truth, but I knew one thing for certain. I was never looking back. The rain soaked through my coat by the time I reached the L train, but I barely felt the cold. I navigated the city on autopilot until I found a rundown motel in the South Loop. The neon sign buzzed ominously outside, casting a sickly red glow over the peeling paint of the building. I paid for 3 nights in cash, using the last bills I had in my wallet, and locked myself inside a room that smelled faintly of stale smoke and bleach. Sitting on the edge of a sagging mattress, I pulled out my laptop. I needed to assess the damage. I logged into my primary checking account, expecting to see the savings I had meticulously built over the past decade. The screen loaded, and my breath caught in my throat. 0. I refreshed the page, my hands shaking over the keyboard. Still 0. The joint savings account was completely drained. My marketing brain shifted into crisis mode. I immediately pulled a comprehensive credit report. What I saw made the blood rush to my ears, drowning out the sound of the rain outside. 5 new high-limit credit cards had been opened in my name over the last 6 months. Every single one was maxed out. Derek, with his background as a financial director, had used my social security number, bypassed the alert systems, and buried me under a mountain of debt. He had funded his extravagant lifestyle and his affair with my sister entirely on my pristine credit. My score, once flawless, was effectively destroyed. He had not just broken my heart. He had financially assassinated me. I was entirely cut off, isolated, and pushed to the absolute brink of ruin. A sharp knock at the door made me jump. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had not told a single soul where I was. I crept toward the door and peered through the peephole. Standing in the dim corridor light, brushing rain from her dark curls, was Jasmine. Jasmine is my brother Ethan's wife, a brilliant, no-nonsense African-American woman who worked as a senior corporate auditor downtown. From the day she married into our family, she had quietly observed the toxic dynamics, never buying into my parents' worship of Madison or their dismissal of me. She saw right through their performative perfection. I undid the chain and pulled the door open. Jasmine stepped inside quickly, taking one look at the glowing laptop screen, the tears of rage I was fighting back in the bleak motel walls. She pulled me into a fierce, grounding hug. I knew he was a snake, Jasmine said, her voice dropping to a low, furious register. But I did not realize he was a thief until tonight. I pulled back confused. How did you find me? How do you know? I track corporate fraud for a living, Hannah. Finding a newly processed transaction for a South Loop motel on a debit card you rarely use was child's play. She reached into her leather tote bag and pulled out a thick sealed manila envelope. Your parents called Ethan an hour ago, playing the victims, spinning a ridiculous story about you having a breakdown and leaving Derek. I knew it was garbage. I drove to your condo while they were busy celebrating with Madison. Jasmine handed me the envelope. It was heavy. I opened the flap and looked inside. Stacks of $100 bills stared back at me alongside a sleek silver USB drive. That is $5,000 in cash, Jasmine said, maintaining steady eye contact. Clean, untraceable, and yours. You are going to need it to survive the next few weeks because I am guessing you just looked at your credit report. I nodded, the reality of the sabotage threatening to crush me. He opened cards in my name. He drained everything. I am completely cut off. Jasmine, I have nothing. You have this, she said, tapping the outside of the envelope, right where the USB drive rested. Do you know what Derek was doing in your home office while your parents were busy moving Madison's bags into your guest room? I shook my head, dread pooling in my stomach. He was trying to steal your future, Jasmine explained, her auditor instincts sharp and analytical. I walked in and caught him downloading files from your desktop. He thought I was on his side. He actually bragged about it. He was trying to fence your business plan. For the past 2 years, I had spent every weekend and late night drafting a comprehensive, highly detailed business plan for a luxury fitness club. I called it Apex Elite. It was not just a gym. It was a high-end networking hub for Chicago's elite, complete with financial projections, zoning strategies, and marketing blueprints. It was my dream, the escape plan I had been meticulously building. Derek had always mocked it as a silly little side project. He had a meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning with a rival investor to sell your intellectual property, Jasmine continued. He was going to pass off your financial models and marketing strategies as his own work to secure a massive consultant fee. He wanted to make sure you had absolutely nothing left to rebuild with. My hands tightened around the envelope. Did he get it? Jasmine offered a slow, sharp smile. Please, I am an auditor. I told him he was using the wrong encryption protocol for a file transfer of that size, offered to fix it for him, and permanently wiped the entire hard drive instead. I corrupted his cloud backups while he was pouring himself a celebratory drink. The only surviving copy of the Apex Elite business plan is on that flash drive in your hand. I stared at the small silver device. It was the only piece of my life that Derek had not managed to destroy. Jasmine had walked into a den of vipers and quietly extracted the one thing that could save me. Ethan does not know I am here, Jasmine said softly, her professional demeanor melting into genuine sisterly affection. Your brother is weak when it comes to your parents, and I refuse to let them drag you down anymore. You have been the scapegoat for that family your entire life. They took your home, your husband, and your credit. But they did not take your brain, Hannah. She reached out and squeezed my shoulders. You take this cash. You find a better place to stay tomorrow. And you build this gym. You make them watch you succeed. I looked down at the $5,000 and the USB drive. The freezing rain continued to batter the motel window, but the coldness inside my chest was entirely gone. It was replaced by a burning, absolute clarity. Derek thought he had left me with nothing but debt and humiliation. My parents thought they had neatly disposed of their disappointing daughter. They had vastly underestimated me. I held the drive tightly in my palm, feeling the sharp edges of the metal. The grief of my broken marriage evaporated, burned away by a relentless drive to survive. I was not going to just rebuild my life. I was going to build an empire. The very next morning, I checked out of the motel and put Jasmine's cash to work. I found a tiny, drafty studio apartment above a noisy laundromat in a neighborhood Derek would not even drive through. I paid 6 months of rent up front in cash. It was not glamorous, but it was mine, and more importantly, it was secure. I traded my designer marketing suits for a diner apron, picking up double shifts waiting tables just to keep the lights on and buy groceries. The physical exhaustion of carrying heavy trays and dealing with demanding customers for 12 hours a day actually helped. It kept my mind sharp and my body moving. But my real work started when my diner shift ended. Armed with a cheap, refurbished laptop and the files Jasmine had rescued, I spent every night refining the Apex Elite business plan. I memorized every financial projection, every zoning requirement, and every demographic statistic. I had a vision for a fitness club that went beyond just weights and treadmills. Apex Elite was going to be an exclusive sanctuary for Chicago's top tier, offering state-of-the-art equipment, private recovery suites, and unparalleled networking opportunities. It was bulletproof on paper. The problem was getting anyone to look past the paper to the woman holding it. Over the next 2 months, I walked into every major bank in Chicago. I wore my best surviving blazer, carried my printed prospectus, and delivered pitches that would have won over the toughest boardrooms in my old life. The loan officers would nod enthusiastically at the revenue projections, and then pull my credit report. The atmosphere in this room would change instantly. The smiles would freeze. The folders would close. I am sorry, they would say, their voices dripping with that practiced corporate pity. Your concept is fascinating, but with 5 defaulted accounts and a credit score currently sitting in the basement, we simply cannot approve a commercial loan. I tried explaining the fraud. I brought the police reports I had filed regarding Derek's identity theft. But commercial banking does not care about domestic betrayal. They care about risk, and Derek had successfully turned my name into a massive financial hazard. After the 9th rejection, I sat on a bench outside a Chase branch on LaSalle Street, watching the businessmen in tailored suits walk by. A familiar voice in my head, sounding exactly like my mother, whispered that I should just give up, find a regular marketing job, and accept my defeat. I silenced that voice immediately. I stood up, smoothed my blazer, and scheduled a meeting with a 10th bank. That evening, Jasmine stopped by the diner during my closing shift. She sat at a booth ordering black coffee and watching me wipe down tables. When I finished, I slid into the booth across from her, bone-tired but refusing to show it. "They rejected me again today," I said flatly. "The numbers are perfect, Jasmine. The business model is flawless. But the second they see the credit score Derek gave me, I am dead in the water." Jasmine took a slow sip of her coffee. "I know. I have been tracking your applications. You are aiming too high, Hannah. You are going to the big corporate banks. They use automated algorithms that flag your score before a human even reviews the plan. You need an independent credit union, one that values individual guarantors over automated risk scores." I sighed, rubbing my temples. "I do not have a guarantor. My parents would rather light their money on fire than invest in me." Jasmine reached into her designer briefcase and slid a sleek blue folder across the diner table. "I am not your parents," she said smoothly. "I have an appointment set for you tomorrow morning at 10 with the senior lending officer at Horizon Credit Union. They review commercial loans differently. And they already have a silent guarantor on file for this specific application." I stared at her, my heart skipping a beat. "Jasmine, you cannot do that. If Ethan finds out you backed my loan, my parents will make your life a living nightmare." "Let them try," Jasmine countered, her eyes flashing with defiance. "I have my own money, my own career, and my own legal protections. Ethan knows better than to question my financial decisions. I reviewed the Apex Elite business plan myself, Hannah. As an auditor, I look for flaws. There are none. You have built a goldmine on that USB drive. I am not doing this out of pity. I am doing this because I recognize a brilliant investment when I see one. Go to the meeting. Get the money." The next morning at Horizon Credit Union felt entirely different. The loan officer reviewed Jasmine's secure backing, read through my aggressive marketing strategies, and smiled. 3 days later, $250,000 in startup capital was deposited into a brand new ironclad business account in my name. I did not waste a single second. I quit the diner and drove straight to the West Loop. It was an up-and-coming industrial district perfect for the gritty, high-end aesthetic I wanted. I found a massive, dilapidated brick warehouse that had been sitting empty for 2 years. It had towering ceilings, exposed steel beams, and floor-to-ceiling windows caked with grime. It was a complete disaster. It was absolutely perfect. I signed the commercial lease that same afternoon. To stretch my startup capital, I became my own general contractor. I was at the warehouse 18 hours a day. I ripped up rotting floorboards, sanded decades of rust off the exposed beams, and painted the towering brick walls by hand. My muscles ached constantly. I lived on protein bars and black coffee, sleeping on an air mattress in the back office because I refused to waste time commuting. Every swing of the sledgehammer, every stroke of the paint roller was fueled by the memory of Derek's smug face and my parents' betrayal. I poured all my rage, all my humiliation, and all my relentless ambition into that concrete floor. Slowly, the broken warehouse began to transform into a sleek, modern sanctuary. The vision was coming to life perfectly, but I was about to find out that securing the building was only the first hurdle. My new landlord was not going to make things easy. The morning the city inspector slapped a bright red stop work order on the front doors of the warehouse, I nearly threw my sledgehammer through the glass. I had been awake since 4 in the morning installing soundproof insulation along the eastern wall. My hands were blistered, my hair was caked in white drywall dust, and I was running on nothing but cheap diner coffee. The inspector claimed there was a discrepancy with the structural permits regarding the reinforced flooring I was laying down for the heavy free weights. According to him, the building owner had flagged the renovation. I ripped the notice off the glass, my blood boiling. I had meticulously reviewed the commercial lease before signing. The modifications were entirely within my rights as a tenant. Before I could pull out my phone to unleash hell on the property management company, a sleek black town car pulled up to the curb. The back door opened, and a man stepped out. He looked to be in his early 30s, wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that looked absurdly out of place against the gritty backdrop of the West Loop. He walked with a quiet, commanding authority, bypassing the caution tape I had strung up and stepping directly into my construction zone. He looked around the cavernous space, his dark eyes scanning the exposed beams and the freshly sanded floors before finally landing on me. "You must be the tenant trying to tear down the load-bearing walls," he said. His voice was deep calm and entirely too arrogant for someone standing in my territory. "I am Leo. My holding company owns this building. I came to see how much damage I needed to sue you for." I did not shrink back. I wiped a streak of plaster off my cheek, gripped the handle of my crowbar, and walked straight up to him. "I am not touching your load-bearing walls," I replied, my voice hard and sharp. "If you or your property managers had bothered to read the architectural blueprints I submitted 3 weeks ago, you would know that the reinforced flooring is completely freestanding. It rests on a high-density shock absorption grid that distributes the weight of the equipment without compromising your precious foundation." Leo raised a single eyebrow. He crossed his arms, looking down at me. He was clearly expecting a panicked small business owner who would crumble at the first sign of legal threats. He expected me to cry, to apologize, to beg for leniency. "You are in violation of Clause 7 of your lease," he stated smoothly. "Any major structural adjustments require written authorization from my office. You do not have it. Hence the stop work order on the door." I dropped the crowbar. It hit the concrete floor with a loud, echoing crack. "I do not have written authorization because your leasing office has been sitting on my secondary zoning application for 20 days, I fired back, stepping even closer. "Clause 7 mandates a response within 14 business days. You missed the deadline. Under Chicago Municipal Commercial Code, failure to provide a written denial within that window constitutes implied consent for non-structural interior improvements. I am entirely within compliance, Leo. You are the one breaching the contract by sending an inspector to halt my progress." The vast warehouse fell completely silent. The sound of the city traffic outside seemed to fade away. Leo stared at me. The arrogance in his posture slowly evaporated, replaced by genuine shock. He looked at my dust-covered clothes, my bruised hands, and the sheer, unadulterated fury in my eyes. He looked at the massive space around us, taking in the sheer volume of physical labor I had accomplished entirely on my own in a matter of weeks. "You are doing all of this yourself?" he asked, his tone shifting from hostile to intensely curious. "Every single square foot," I answered, lifting my chin. "Because I do not have the luxury of waiting around for corporate bureaucrats to stamp a piece of paper." Every day this gym is not open is a day I am losing money. He uncrossed his arms. A gym. The neighborhood is already saturated with fitness chains. What makes you think a warehouse gym in the West Loop is going to survive the first fiscal quarter? The challenge in his voice was exactly the kind of fuel I needed. I did not just answer him. I pitched him. I walked over to a makeshift desk made of plywood and sawhorses, grabbed my primary prospectus, and shoved it into his chest. Apex Elite is not a chain, I said, my voice ringing with absolute certainty. It is an exclusive waitlisted sanctuary. The target demographic is high net worth individuals, corporate executives, and elite athletes who want absolute privacy. I am not selling memberships. I am selling a lifestyle and a high-level networking hub. The facility will feature biometric entry, private recovery suites with cryotherapy, and personalized concierge trainers. The break-even point is calculated at exactly 100 members. I already have soft commitments from 50 purely based on my previous marketing network. Leo opened the prospectus. He scanned the financial projections, the demographic breakdowns, and the profit margins. His eyes moved rapidly across the pages. I could see his sharp, analytical mind processing the numbers. He was a commercial real estate tycoon. He knew a gold mine when he saw one. When he finally looked up from the paperwork, the cold, detached landlord was completely gone. In his eyes, I saw absolute, undeniable respect. "You built this business model?" he asked softly. "I built the model, I secured the capital, and I am currently sanding the floors," I replied, holding his gaze. "So are you going to get out of my way and let me finish, or are we going to court over Clause 7? A slow, genuinely impressed smile spread across Leo's face. He closed the folder and handed it back to me. "I have dealt with hundreds of commercial tenants in this city, Hannah," he said, using my name for the first time. "I have never met anyone who fights for their space quite like you do. You do not just have a good concept. You have the exact kind of relentless drive that makes a business untouchable." He reached into his tailored jacket, pulled out a sleek black pen, and gestured to the red stop work order I had tossed on the table. "I am going to make a phone call to the zoning board right now," Leo said, his voice dropping to a smooth, commanding register. "I will personally fast-track the secondary permits through City Hall by tomorrow morning. You will not lose another day of labor." I looked at him, caught off guard by the sudden total shift in his demeanor. "Why are you helping me?" "Because I like to back winners," Leo replied, his dark eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made the air in the freezing warehouse feel suddenly warm. "And I have a very strong feeling that Apex Elite is going to take over this city. Keep the paint off the windows, Hannah. I will be back tomorrow with your paperwork." He turned and walked out of the warehouse, climbing back into his town car. I watched the vehicle pull away from the curb, merging into the bustling Chicago traffic. I stood alone in the center of the massive space, feeling the blisters on my hands and the ache in my spine. I had just gone toe-to-toe with a commercial real estate titan and walked away with a powerful ally. I picked up my crowbar, turned back to the eastern wall, and got exactly back to work. 1 year later, the grinding roar of power tools had been replaced by the rhythmic hum of state-of-the-art treadmills and the quiet, deliberate clinking of iron. The dilapidated warehouse in the West Loop was completely unrecognizable. Apex Elite had opened its doors and almost instantly conquered Chicago. It was exactly the sanctuary I had envisioned, a brutalist yet fiercely luxurious fortress for the city's highest earners. The exposed steel beams were painted matte black, contrasting with the gleaming rows of imported equipment and the biometric security scanners guarding the entrance. I had built private cryotherapy suites, a juice bar that served custom recovery blends, and a networking lounge that looked more like a 5-star hotel lobby than a fitness center. We hit our maximum capacity of exclusive VIP members within the first 3 months. Now there was a 6-month waitlist just to get an interview for a membership. I stood on the glass-enclosed mezzanine overlooking the main training floor, holding a tablet with our latest quarterly financials. The numbers were staggering. I had paid off the initial loan Jasmine helped me secure ahead of schedule. The business was generating pure, undeniable profit. A pair of strong arms wrapped around my waist from behind, and a familiar deep voice murmured against my ear, "You are supposed to be taking the morning off." I leaned back against Leo, smiling as I locked the tablet screen. "I was just reviewing the new applicant list. We have 3 tech CEOs and a state senator begging to bypass the wait list." Leo chuckled, turning me around to face him. He looked incredibly sharp in a tailored navy suit, having just come from a commercial real estate closing. Over the past year, our dynamic had shifted from a tense landlord and tenant dispute to a fiercely loyal partnership. He had kept his promise that day in the freezing warehouse, fast-tracking my permits and backing my vision. In return, I had built the most profitable tenant property in his portfolio. Somewhere along the line, the late-night strategy meetings over takeout boxes had turned into dinner dates, and those dates had blossomed into a solid, unshakable romance. Leo was everything my ex-husband was not. He was secure, brutally honest, and completely unthreatened by a successful woman. "Let them wait," Leo said, kissing my forehead. "Exclusivity is your greatest asset. Now put the tablet down. I am taking you to lunch." While I was standing on the mezzanine of a multi-million-dollar empire, completely in love and financially untouchable, the man who had thrown me into the freezing rain was currently sweating through his designer shirt across town. In a suffocatingly bright, aggressively pink bridal boutique on the Magnificent Mile, Derek sat on a velvet sofa, staring at his banking app with a knot of pure panic twisting in his stomach. Madison stood on a circular pedestal in front of a massive mirror, admiring herself in a custom silk and lace gown. She twisted side to side, her face arranged in a perpetual pout. "I do not know, Derek," she whined, running a hand over the bodice. The designer said, adding, "The Swarovski crystal train will be another $15,000. But if we do not add it, the dress just looks cheap. We cannot have a cheap wedding. What will your clients think?" Derek swallowed hard, desperately trying to keep his composure. The wedding budget had started at $50,000. It was now ballooning past $150,000. Madison demanded imported orchids, a string quartet, a 5-course plated dinner, and a venue that cost more than most people made in 2 years. She played the victim masterfully, crying that the stress of wedding planning was bad for her health, leaning heavily on the lie of her fragility to extract every single dollar Derek had. "Babe, the dress looks perfect as it is," Derek offered weakly. Madison's eyes narrowed in the mirror. She turned to face him, crossing her arms. "Are you saying I am not worth the crystals my parents are already paying for the rehearsal dinner? The least you can do is make sure I look like a proper executive's wife. Unless your firm is not doing as well as you claimed?" Derek flinched. He quickly forced a confident, arrogant smile. "Of course not. Add the crystals. Put it on the platinum card." Madison squealed and turned back to the boutique attendant, demanding the upgrades. Derek stared down at his phone, his chest tight with anxiety. His firm was not just struggling, it was hemorrhaging clients. The wealthy investors he relied on for commissions were pulling their accounts, sensing his desperation, and shifting their funds to younger, sharper firms. He was living entirely on credit, moving money between accounts, just to cover the minimum payments on the lavish lifestyle Madison required. He needed a major new client, and he needed one immediately. Earlier that morning, his senior partner had pulled him aside with a stern warning. The firm needed Derek to bring in fresh capital, or his position as director was going to be liquidated. The partner had casually mentioned that all the real networking in Chicago, the million-dollar handshake deals, and the venture capital moves were no longer happening on the golf course. They were happening in the steam rooms and lounges of a brand-new, hyper-exclusive fitness club in the West Loop called Apex Elite. Derek had spent the entire morning researching the club. He saw the sleek photos of the facility, the rumors of billionaires closing deals by the juice bar, and the notorious waitlist. He knew that if he could just get inside that building, if he could just rub shoulders with the city's elite and hand out his business cards, he could land a whale of a client and save his career. He could pay for Madison's ridiculous crystal train and keep up the facade of the wealthy, untouchable finance bro. He had absolutely no idea who owned the building. He had no clue that the very woman he had discarded and left with ruined credit was the gatekeeper to the only place that could save him. "We need to make a stop after this," Derek told Madison as she finally stepped off the pedestal, where Madison asked, checking her reflection one last time. "The West Loop." Derek replied, adjusting his tie and puffing out his chest, trying to summon the arrogance that had always been his armor. "There is an exclusive new club called Apex Elite. I am going to buy us VIP memberships today. It is going to put me in the same room as the biggest investors in the city." Madison smiled, her eyes lighting up at the word exclusive. "Oh, I love that. Can we get couples massages there?" "They offer everything," Derek said, pulling out a credit card that was dangerously close to its limit. "Do not worry. I know exactly how to handle the staff at these luxury places. I will just demand to speak to the manager and flash some cash. They will bump us to the front of the wait list in 5 minutes." He handed the card to the boutique attendant, completely blind to the fact that he was marching directly into a trap he could not possibly fight his way out of. The ground floor lobby of Apex Elite was designed to be a sanctuary of absolute control. I had personally chosen every element from the matte black steel fixtures to the towering walls of living green moss, creating an atmosphere of intimidating quiet luxury. The front desk, carved from a single slab of imported obsidian marble, was usually an oasis of flawless professional calm. Our staff was trained to handle billionaires, professional athletes, and senators with discreet, unwavering politeness. But as my glass elevator descended from the mezzanine level, a shrill, piercing voice shattered that carefully curated silence. It was a voice I would recognize anywhere, one that carried the distinct nasal pitch of unearned entitlement. "Madison." I stood perfectly still in the descending elevator, my hands resting lightly in the pockets of my tailored designer suit. Through the pristine glass, I watched the scene unfold on the lobby floor like a slow-motion train wreck. Derek was leaning heavily against the obsidian desk, his face flushed an ugly mottled red. He was wearing a suit that looked expensive but strained slightly at the seams, a physical manifestation of his current financial desperation. He held a credit card pinched tightly between his fingers, tapping it aggressively against the marble. Madison stood just behind him, clutching a massive, heavily branded shopping bag from a boutique on the Magnificent Mile, her face contorted into a petulant scowl. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Derek demanded, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "I am a senior director. I have major investors waiting to meet me in your lounge. You are going to run the card again." Standing behind the desk was Carter, my lead membership coordinator. He did not flinch. He offered a polite, professionally detached smile that I had personally trained him to use when dealing with difficult rejections. "I apologize," Sir Carter said smoothly, "but our system requires a comprehensive financial verification for all VIP tier applications. Your profile flagged an immediate decline due to insufficient capital and a history of severe debt utilization. Furthermore, even if the financial check had cleared, Apex Elite currently has a strict 6-month waitlist. We are not accepting walk-in applications today." Madison threw her hands up her shopping bag, crinkling loudly. "This is completely ridiculous," she shrieked, stomping her designer heel against the polished concrete. "We are trying to give you money. We do not do waitlists. Get your manager out here right now. I am not standing in this lobby being insulted by some glorified receptionist." The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors glided open with a soft, melodic chime. I stepped out. My heels clicked against the concrete in a slow, deliberate rhythm. The sound was sharp enough to cut through Madison's ongoing tantrum. Carter saw me approaching and instantly straightened his posture, stepping back slightly, in a silent show of deference. Derek turned around, an arrogant reprimand already forming on his lips. He was ready to unleash his fury on whoever was in charge. But the moment his eyes locked onto mine, the words died in his throat. He froze completely. All the aggressive, flushed color drained from his face, leaving him looking sickly and pale. His eyes widened, taking in the stark contrast of the woman standing before him. The last time he saw me, I was a broken, sobbing mess, standing in the freezing rain in a worn-out coat. Now I was wearing a bespoke razor-sharp suit, my posture radiating absolute untouchable authority. Madison gasped, taking a stumbling step backward. She nearly dropped her boutique shopping bag. "Hannah," she breathed out, her voice trembling with genuine shock. I stopped a few feet away from them, folding my arms. I did not say a word. I just looked at them, letting the silence stretch, letting them suffocate in the sheer awkwardness of the moment. For a few seconds, Derek looked genuinely panicked. His brain was visibly struggling to process my presence in this hyper-exclusive, multi-million-dollar facility. He looked at my clothes, at my confident stance, and at the respectful way Carter was looking at me. Then I watched his fragile, desperate ego do the only thing it could to protect itself. He rationalized the situation. He downgraded me in his mind to fit his own narrative of superiority. A slow, mocking smile crept across Derek's face, replacing his panic with that familiar, sickening arrogance. "Well, well, well," Derek sneered, pocketing his declined credit card. "Look who landed on her feet. You work here." "Of course you do. What are you, the front desk supervisor, the shift manager?" "I guess you had to find some way to pay off all that debt you racked up." Madison caught on to his tone immediately. Her shock morphed into a nasty, triumphant smirk. She stepped out from behind Derek, looking me up and down with blatant condescension. "Wow, Hannah. A gym manager. I mean, it is a step down from your old corporate job, but at least they make you dress nicely. It suits you. Fetching towels and dealing with customer complaints." The sheer, unadulterated delusion radiating from the two of them was almost impressive. Derek genuinely believed I was a lowly employee he could order around. He was projecting his own financial ruin onto me, desperate to believe he was still the successful, powerful man who had discarded me. "Since you are the manager," Derek said, stepping closer and attempting to look down his nose at me, "you can make yourself useful. Your attendant here is being incredibly difficult. I need 2 VIP access passes immediately. Override the credit flag in your system and push the application through. I have high net worth clients waiting inside, and I do not have time to play games with the hired help. Do your job, Hannah." I looked at the faint sheen of nervous sweat on his forehead. I looked at the way his hands trembled slightly despite his aggressive tone. He was begging. Disguised as a command, he was absolutely begging to get inside my building because his entire fake life depended on it. I let a slow, icy smile spread across my face, enjoying every single second of his impending destruction. Derek mistook my silence for hesitation. He leaned heavily against the obsidian marble desk, tapping his declined credit card with an arrogant, impatient rhythm. He actually believed he had cornered me. He thought the tailored suit I wore was just a uniform provided by corporate management to make the front desk staff look presentable. Beside him, Madison shifted her weight, sighing loudly as she adjusted her grip on her heavy boutique shopping bags. She complained that the ambient lighting was giving her a headache and demanded I hurry up and process their VIP passes. They were a perfectly matched pair of delusional parasites. The lobby of Apex Elite was not empty. We were in the middle of the morning rush, the peak hour for Chicago's most influential figures to finish their workouts and head to the networking lounge. A prominent venture capitalist I had finalized a contract with last week paused by the custom juice bar, holding a protein shake. 2 partners from a top-tier law firm stood near the recovery suites, pausing their conversation to observe the commotion. They were watching Derek and Madison with undisguised distaste. In a sanctuary designed for discreet, high-level networking, my ex-husband and my sister were acting like loud, desperate tourists. Derek noticed the audience. Instead of lowering his voice, he puffed out his chest even further. He wanted these wealthy strangers to see him asserting dominance. He wanted them to think he was a man of immense importance, putting a lowly employee in her place. I did not fetch his paperwork. I did not touch the computer terminal. I did not offer a single word of apology. I simply turned my head slightly toward the biometric security gates and caught the eye of my head of security. David was a towering former Marine who ran my facility with absolute precision. I gave him a single, barely perceptible nod. David moved instantly. His heavy boots made no sound on the polished concrete floor as he approached the front desk. Two other security guards flanked him, moving in perfect synchronization. They formed a solid, imposing wall of muscle directly behind Derek and Madison. Derek blinked, his arrogant smile faltering as the shadow of the security team fell over him. He looked from David back to me, a flicker of genuine confusion finally piercing through his delusion. He demanded to know what was going on, his voice losing its booming confidence and pitching up nervously. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. I did not yell. I did not need to. I spoke with absolute unwavering clarity, allowing the pristine acoustics of the lobby to carry my voice to every single person in the room. I informed Derek that he was deeply mistaken about my employment status. I stated that I was not the front desk supervisor. I was not the shift manager. I announced that I was the sole founder, owner, and chief executive officer of Apex Elite. The color drained from Derek's face so fast he looked physically ill. His mouth fell open, but no sound came out. He looked around the massive multi-million-dollar facility, his eyes darting wildly to the imported equipment, the advanced biometric scanners, the luxury recovery suites, and the pristine architecture. The staggering reality of what I had built crashed down on him. The exclusive fitness club he desperately needed to save his failing career, the sanctuary of wealth he was trying to infiltrate, belonged entirely to the woman he had thrown into the freezing rain 1 year ago. Madison shook her head violently, her boutique shopping bag sliding from her shoulders and hitting the marble floor with a dull thud. She shrieked that it was a lie. She accused me of making it up, screaming that I was just a broke dropout who could not even keep a husband. Her voice cracked hysterical and shrill, completely shattering the sophisticated atmosphere of my building. She stomped her foot, demanding someone tell her the truth. I ignored her completely. I kept my eyes locked on Derek. I addressed the lobby, ensuring the high-net-worth individuals he was trying to impress heard every single syllable. I announced that as the sole owner, I reserved the right to refuse service to anyone at any time. I explicitly stated that Apex Elite maintained incredibly strict financial integrity standards. I declared loudly that we absolutely did not grant access, let alone VIP status, to individuals with a documented history of severe credit fraud, predatory debt utilization, and identity theft. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. The venture capitalist by the juice bar raised an eyebrow, looking at Derek with profound disgust. The law firm partners turned their backs on him entirely. Derek's professional reputation, the fragile fake facade he had been fighting so fiercely to protect, disintegrated into dust in front of the exact people he needed to save his firm. He reached a trembling hand out toward me, his voice dropping to a desperate, pathetic whisper. He begged me to stop, pleading that I was ruining his life. I stepped back, calmly adjusting the cuffs of my designer blazer. I instructed David to escort the two trespassers off my property permanently. David clamped a massive, unyielding hand onto Derek's shoulder. The other guards boxed Madison in. Madison started screaming, kicking her designer heels against the floor, demanding they unhand her. She yelled that she was fragile, the exact same manipulative lie she had used to steal my home. Nobody in the building cared. The security team physically marched them toward the sliding glass doors. Derek stumbled, his expensive suit wrinkling awkwardly as he was shoved forward. Madison dragged her feet, her face red and streaked with tears of pure, unadulterated humiliation. The glass doors parted, and they were thrown out onto the cold concrete sidewalk of the West Loop landing, directly in front of a line of luxury vehicles waiting at the valet stand. Right at that exact moment, a sleek black Aston Martin pulled up to the curb. The driver's door opened, and Leo stepped out. He looked breathtaking, exuding the kind of effortless power, wealth, and quiet confidence that Derek spent his entire life pretending to possess. Leo handed his keys to the valet and walked right past Derek, completely ignoring the pathetic, sweating man trembling on the sidewalk. Leo walked through the sliding glass doors, his dark eyes instantly finding mine. He smiled, that rare, incredibly warm smile he reserved only for me. He closed the distance between us, wrapped his strong arms around my waist, pulled me close, and kissed me deeply, right there in the center of the lobby. When we pulled apart, he looked down at me and asked if everything was all right. I smiled, glancing over his shoulder through the glass windows. Derek was pressing his hands against the glass from the outside, his face twisted in a mask of absolute agonizing jealousy and defeat. I looked back at Leo and told him everything was absolutely perfect. We linked hands, walked out the private side exit to his car, and drove away, leaving my ex-husband stranded in the gutter. I did not know it at the time, but the moment Leo and I drove away from the curb, Derek did not go home to reflect on his monumental mistakes. He did not comfort Madison, who was still sobbing on the sidewalk, clutching her useless boutique bags. Instead, he left her standing there and walked 3 blocks in the freezing wind until he found a grimy, dimly lit dive bar. He pushed through the heavy wooden door, ignoring the smell of stale beer and cheap bleach that permeated the air. He sat alone in a torn vinyl booth in the darkest corner of the room and ordered the cheapest whiskey they had. Derek stared at his reflection in the smudged mirror behind the bar. His fragile ego was entirely shattered. He had spent the last year convincing himself that I was rotting in some miserable apartment crying over losing him. Discovering that I was not only vastly richer than him, but also dating a commercial real estate billionaire was a psychological, fatal blow. Seeing Leo a man who possessed actual wealth and power rather than a credit-funded illusion broke whatever remained of Derek's sanity. He gripped his glass so tightly his knuckles turned white. His finance firm was bleeding clients, and he had just been permanently banned from the only networking hub that could save his career. But Derek was a narcissist, and narcissists do not accept defeat gracefully. They lash out. Sitting in that sticky booth, a toxic, desperate plan began to form in his mind. He decided that if I could build a luxury fitness empire, he could easily do it better. He would open a rival gym. He would call it Iron Crest. It would be bigger, more expensive, and more exclusive. He would completely dominate the Chicago fitness market and force me into bankruptcy. There was only one problem. He needed members. He needed the exact roster of billionaires, professional athletes, and corporate executives that I had already curated. He could not afford to spend a year building a reputation from scratch. He needed to steal mine. Derek threw a $20 bill on the table and left the bar. He hailed a cab and directed the driver to a notoriously sketchy neighborhood on the south side. He was looking for a man he used to employ as an independent tech contractor. The man had been quietly fired from Derek's finance firm 2 years ago for unethically scraping client data. That exact lack of morals made him the perfect criminal for what Derek needed tonight. Derek climbed 3 flights of stairs in a building that smelled like damp cardboard and old takeout. He pounded on a peeling wooden door until the deadbolt clicked open. The contractor let him into a cramped apartment, illuminated entirely by the harsh blue light of 6 computer monitors. Empty energy drink cans, tangled wires, and disassembled hard drives littered every available surface. Derek did not waste time with pleasantries. He stood in the center of the chaotic room and laid out his entire vengeful strategy. He wanted the contractor to launch a coordinated, devastating digital attack on Apex Elite. First, he ordered a massive social media smear campaign. He wanted fake reviews flooding every platform claiming my gym was unsanitary, that the private recovery suites were poorly maintained, that the training staff was unqualified, and that the biometric security was a complete scam. He wanted my pristine reputation dragged through the mud to create instant panic among my elite clientele. But the smear campaign was just a distraction. The real goal was the data. Derek instructed the tech contractor to breach the firewall of Apex Elite. He wanted the entire back-end database. He wanted the encrypted names, the private phone numbers, the corporate email addresses, and the personal financial profiles of every single high-net-worth individual on my roster. Derek paced the small, dark apartment, his voice rising with manic excitement as he explained his grand vision. Once the database was secured, he would personally contact every single one of my VIP members. He would use the fake negative reviews to sow doubt about my facility, and then he would swoop in like a savior. He would offer them heavily discounted founder memberships at his upcoming superior gym. He was going to steal my entire business model, poach my entire client base, and watch my empire crumble. The contractor leaned back in his rolling chair, typing a few lines of code into his terminal. He did not look impressed. He told Derek that breaching a high-end biometric security network and running a ghost IP smear campaign was not a cheap operation. It was highly illegal and required serious digital infrastructure. The contractor demanded an exorbitant upfront fee strictly payable in untraceable cryptocurrency. Derek did not even flinch. His arrogance had completely blinded him to reality. He promised to have the funds transferred within 48 hours. He had absolutely no money in his bank accounts, his credit cards were completely maxed out, and his firm was on the verge of liquidating his position. But Derek had a backup plan for financing his revenge. He left the dark web hacker's apartment with a sinister, triumphant smile plastered across his face. He walked out into the cold Chicago night, fully believing he had just set the wheels in motion for my absolute destruction. He was going to need massive amounts of capital, not just to pay the hacker, but to secure a commercial lease and build his rival gym. He knew exactly who he was going to manipulate to get that money. He was going to pay a visit to the two people who loved maintaining appearances even more than he did. He was going to bleed my parents dry. The sprawling manicured lawns of my parents' suburban estate looked deceptively peaceful under the glow of the streetlights. Thomas and Catherine had spent 30 years cultivating an image of absolute unblemished perfection in that house. It was a monument to their vanity. That same evening, while Derek was busy plotting his digital attack with a dark web hacker, my brother Ethan and his wife Jasmine were enduring another suffocating family dinner inside that very house. Jasmine sat at the long mahogany dining table, expertly masking her disdain behind a polite professional smile. As a senior corporate auditor, she made a living reading the subtle tells of liars and frauds. Sitting in my parents' dining room always felt like an overtime shift to her. Thomas sat at the head of the table swirling a glass of expensive bourbon while Catherine fussed over Madison. Madison sat next to Derek, playing the role of the fragile, exhausted bride, to be dramatically sighing about how stressful her luxury wedding preparations were. Derek played his part perfectly, nodding along and acting the part of the devoted, wealthy provider, even though Jasmine knew his financial standing was a complete illusion. As the catered dinner wound down, Derek wiped his mouth with a linen napkin and cleared his throat. He announced that he needed to speak with Thomas and Catherine privately about a highly sensitive, incredibly lucrative investment opportunity. He shot a condescending look toward Ethan and Jasmine, making it clear they were not invited to the adults' table. Ethan, oblivious to the undercurrents of the room, simply shrugged and pulled out his phone to check sports scores. But Jasmine did not miss a single beat. Her instincts immediately flared. She watched Derek lead my parents into Thomas's private oak-paneled study at the back of the house. The heavy double doors clicked shut behind them. Jasmine waited exactly 5 minutes. She stood up, casually mentioning to Ethan that she was going to the kitchen to get a glass of sparkling water. Her heels made absolutely no sound on the thick Persian rugs as she bypassed the kitchen entirely and glided down the dimly lit hallway toward the study. She pressed her back against the cool wall just outside the heavy doors. The wood was thick, but Derek's voice was loud, fueled by a mixture of panic and manic arrogance. Jasmine pulled her smartphone from her pocket, opened the voice memo app, and hit record. Inside the study, Derek was weaving a masterclass of manipulation. He was pacing the floor, pitching his grand vision. He told my parents that the fitness industry in Chicago was ripe for a hostile takeover. He claimed he had secured a prime commercial lease and had elite investors lined up to fund a revolutionary new luxury gym called Iron Crest. He promised it would be the most exclusive facility in the Midwest. But then Derek shifted his tone. He lowered his voice, weaponizing my parents' fragile egos. He told them about Apex Elite. He revealed that I was the owner, omitting the part where he and Madison had been humiliatingly thrown out onto the street. Instead, Derek spun a vicious, fabricated narrative. He claimed that I had stolen the business model from him during our divorce. He told Thomas and Catherine that I was running a fraudulent operation, that I was unstable, and that I was actively trying to destroy the family's good name in the city. I have the connections to wipe her off the map, Derek insisted, his voice trembling with manufactured outrage. I have the marketing team, the trainers, the vision. Ironcrest will bankrupt Apex Elite within 6 months. Madison and I will take our rightful place at the top of the Chicago social scene. But the venture capital funds will not clear until the end of the quarter. I need liquid bridge capital right now to secure the contractor bids. Jasmine held her breath, leaning closer to the crack in the door. Thomas spoke next, his voice dripping with his usual arrogant authority. How much capital are you talking about, Derek? We have significant assets tied up in mutual funds and the equity of this house, but liquidating them requires serious justification. I need $2 million, Derek said without hesitation. It is a guaranteed return, Thomas. A guaranteed return. I will pay you back double the principal within a year. But more importantly, we will put Hannah exactly where she belongs. She needs to learn that she cannot betray this family and get away with it. We will crush Hannah into the dirt. Jasmine's eyes widened in the dark hallway. She watched the recording timer tick upward, capturing every single venomous word. Catherine's voice chimed in, entirely devoid of any maternal instinct. She is a vindictive, ungrateful girl, Catherine said coldly. She embarrassed us by leaving you, Derek. She abandoned her sister. If this investment secures Madison's future and puts Hannah in her place, I say we do it. Thomas, we can leverage the house. The mortgage has been paid off for 5 years. We can take out a line of credit and liquidate the retirement portfolios. If Derek says it is a guaranteed return, I trust him. Madison deserves this empire, not Hannah. Excellent. Thomas agreed, his tone sealing the ultimate betrayal. I will contact the wealth manager first thing Monday morning. We will drain the accounts and leverage the property. Let us show Hannah what real power looks like. Jasmine felt a wave of pure, unfiltered disgust wash over her. My own parents were willingly, eagerly agreeing to risk their entire life savings and the roof over their heads just to finance my destruction. They were handing $2 million to a con artist simply because it fed their toxic hatred of me. Jasmine knew exactly what Derek was doing. He was building a house of cards, and when it inevitably collapsed, my parents would be left absolutely destitute. She felt zero pity for them. They had made their choice. Jasmine did not need to hear another word. She stopped the recording, saved the audio file to a secure cloud server, and slipped the phone back into her pocket. She glided back down the hallway, retrieved a glass of ice water from the kitchen to maintain her cover, and walked calmly back into the living room. She tapped Ethan on the shoulder, her face a mask of polite exhaustion. I have a terrible migraine developing, she told her husband. I need to go home right now. Ethan immediately stood up, apologizing to Madison for cutting the evening short. As they walked out the front door and headed to their car in the driveway, Jasmine kept her composure perfectly intact. She waited until Ethan started the engine and pulled out of the sprawling suburban neighborhood. Drop me off at my car at the train station, Jasmine instructed, her voice dropping its polite facade and shifting into absolute corporate warfare mode. I have an emergency audit I need to handle tonight. Ethan looked confused but nodded, used to his wife's intense work schedule. He dropped her off at her sleek sedan. The moment she was alone behind the wheel, Jasmine locked the doors, connected her phone to the car's Bluetooth, and hit the gas. She did not drive home. She merged onto the expressway and floored the accelerator, navigating the late-night traffic with intense precision. She was driving directly to Leo's penthouse in the city. The war had just escalated in a way nobody could have predicted, and she was carrying the exact ammunition we needed to bury them all. Jasmine barely waited for the private elevator to come to a complete stop before she strode into the sprawling penthouse. The sweeping views of the Chicago skyline sparkling through the floor-to-ceiling glass went completely ignored. I was sitting on the leather sofa with a cup of tea, unwinding after a 14-hour day at the club while Leo stood near his desk reviewing a commercial lease agreement. Jasmine did not bother with pleasantries. She walked straight to the center of the room, pulled her phone from her coat pocket, and hit play. The crystal-clear audio of Derek's voice echoed through the vast, quiet space of the penthouse. I sat frozen as I listened to the man I used to be married to outline a meticulous, vicious plan to bankrupt me. But the true gut punch came seconds later. I heard my own father's voice, cold and transactional, agreeing to liquidate his retirement portfolios and leverage the home I grew up in just to finance my destruction. I listened to my mother call me vindictive and ungrateful, eagerly handing over $2 million to a con artist simply because it fed her toxic preference for my sister. The recording clicked off. The penthouse was dead silent. Jasmine stood with her arms crossed, her eyes blazing with protective fury. She explained how she had excused herself from the dining table and caught the entire conspiracy from the hallway. I set my teacup down. My hands were perfectly steady. A year ago, hearing my parents plot my ruin would have shattered me. Tonight, it just confirmed that I had been absolutely right to walk away. I stood up, pulling my phone from my pocket. "I am calling the police," I said, my voice hard and sharp. "Derek hired a dark web contractor. That is corporate espionage and cyber terrorism. We can have detectives at his door by morning. I will file a restraining order, lock down my servers, and let him explain his felony charges to a judge." Before my thumb could hit the dial pad, a large, warm hand gently covered mine. Leo lowered my phone. His dark eyes were calm, but there was a dangerous, calculated edge to his expression. He looked at me with the quiet intensity of a man who moved millions of dollars across global markets before breakfast. "Calling the police is a temporary fix," Hannah Leo said smoothly. "He will hire a decent defense attorney, claim he was just doing aggressive market research, and tie you up in litigation for years. He gets a slap on the wrist, and your parents will keep enabling him. You do not just want to stop him. You want to neutralize the threat permanently." I looked up at him. "What are you suggesting?" Leo walked over to his mahogany desk and poured 2 fingers of bourbon into a crystal glass. "He is trying to play a high-stakes financial game without the capital or the intellect to back it up. So we let him play. But we rigged the board." Jasmine smiled, her auditor instincts immediately catching on to Leo's wavelength. "You want to bait him?" "Exactly," Leo said, taking a slow sip. "He wants to steal your database because he does not have a business model of his own. If we just block his hacker, he will keep trying. Instead, we open a side door. We build a decoy server environment and let his contractor breach it. But we do not give him your real clients. We feed him a fabricated gold mine." My marketing brain clicked into high gear. I saw the entire architecture of the trap forming in real time. "We create fake financial projections," I said, the pieces snapping together. "We generate dummy market research reports showing astronomical conversion rates for luxury fitness spaces in his targeted zip code. We make the rival gym concept look like an absolute guaranteed unicorn." Leo nodded, a proud, sharp smile spreading across his face. "We make the numbers so impossibly lucrative that his fragile ego will not be able to resist. When he sees those fabricated projections, he is going to realize that the $2 million he squeezed out of your parents is not nearly enough to capture the market share he thinks exists. He will want more. He will need massive institutional venture capital to build the empire he thinks he is stealing from you." "And where exactly is the disgraced finance director with maxed-out credit cards going to find legitimate venture capital?" Jasmine asked, leaning against the kitchen island. "He is not," Leo replied, setting his glass down. "He is going to find Vanguard Capital." I recognized the name. It was a blind shell company Leo kept in his vast corporate arsenal, an entity entirely disconnected from his primary real estate holdings, designed for highly discreet acquisitions. "I will have my legal team activate the Vanguard entity tomorrow morning," Leo explained, his voice dropping into a ruthless, businesslike register. "We will establish a temporary office downtown and populate it with a few of my most aggressive corporate attorneys acting as investment partners. When Derek inevitably goes hunting for high-risk capital to fund his delusion, Vanguard will subtly position itself right in his path. We will offer him the lifeline he thinks he needs." Jasmine let out a low whistle of appreciation. "You are going to offer him a predatory loan. A highly leveraged, aggressively structured commercial bridge loan." Leo corrected, his eyes locking onto mine. "We will give him enough rope to hang himself. We let him sign away his business, his assets, and the collateral he stole from your parents. We let him build his little gym. we let him spend the money. And the second he breaches the loan covenants, we drop the guillotine. I stood in the center of the penthouse looking at the man who had effortlessly shifted from my partner into my co-commander. Derek had tried to destroy me in the freezing rain, and my parents had cheered him on. They wanted a war, but they had absolutely no idea the kind of artillery I now had at my disposal. I looked at Leo, then at Jasmine. "Tell your tech team to set up the decoy servers tonight," I said, my voice devoid of any hesitation. "Let us give my ex-husband exactly what he wants." I watched the entire meeting unfold in real time through the encrypted security feed Leo had set up in the Vanguard Capital boardroom. The space was intentionally designed to be a psychological pressure cooker. Located on the 42nd floor of a sterile downtown high-rise, the room featured cold slate walls, an oversized glass table, and aggressive fluorescent lighting that offered absolutely no comfort. It was an environment built to intimidate, but Derek walked in looking like he owned the building. He was wearing a custom Italian suit he definitely could no longer afford, clutching a leather briefcase against his chest like it contained the Holy Grail. Inside that briefcase was the fabricated market research our tech team had intentionally allowed his hired hacker to steal. Derek believed he was walking into this meeting with the ultimate cheat code to the Chicago fitness industry. Sitting across from him at the glass table were three of Leo's most ruthless corporate attorneys, playing the roles of high-risk venture capitalists. The lead attorney, a sharp-featured woman named Veronica, gestured for Derek to sit. She did not offer him water. She did not offer small talk. She went straight to the numbers, forcing Derek to immediately launch into his pitch for Iron Crest. Through the monitor, I watched my ex-husband puff out his chest and deploy the same arrogant, slick salesman routine he had used to deceive me for years. He threw around corporate buzzwords, boasted about his vast network of high-net-worth clients, and confidently presented our fake data as his own brilliant market analysis. He promised them that Iron Crest would completely bankrupt Apex Elite within 2 fiscal quarters. He claimed he had an inside track on the city's most exclusive demographic. Veronica played him flawlessly. She leaned forward, resting her chin on her hands, and feigned absolute fascination. She stroked his fragile ego with surgical precision. She praised his aggressive vision and told him the projected conversion rates were nothing short of revolutionary. I watched Derek eat up every single word. His chest puffed out even further. A smug, victorious smile spread across his face. He truly believed he was the smartest man in the room. Then the trap was sprung. Veronica slid a thick, heavy stack of legal documents across the glass table. It was a commercial bridge loan for $5 million, but the terms hidden within those pages were absolutely predatory. The interest rate was suffocatingly high. More importantly, the collateral clauses were absolute and unforgiving. To secure the $5 million, Derek had to put up everything. The contract cross-collateralized his failing finance firm, all of his remaining personal assets, and the deed to my parents' fully paid-off suburban home. But the true danger, the poison pill Leo and I had spent hours crafting, was buried in the financial covenants. The contract included a zero-tolerance acceleration clause. It explicitly stated that the $5 million could only be used for direct construction and operational costs of the gym. If a single dollar of the loan was mismanaged, diverted, or used for unauthorized personal expenses, Vanguard Capital reserved the right to call the entire loan due immediately. There would be no grace period. There would be no warning. If he breached the covenant, Vanguard would instantly seize all collateral. Veronica tapped the thick document with her pen. She politely suggested that Derek take a few days to have his legal counsel review the 50-page contract. It was a calculated psychological push. She knew exactly how Derek's mind worked. I watched him stare at the stack of paper. A bead of sweat formed at his temple. He was desperate. His finance firm was crumbling. Madison was bleeding his bank accounts dry with her extravagant wedding demands, and he was terrified that if he walked out of that room, these angel investors would realize he was a fraud and pull the offer. His greed and his desperate need to destroy me completely overrode his basic professional training. "I am a senior financial director," Derek said, offering a condescending chuckle that echoed through the feed. I do not need a babysitter to read a standard term sheet for me. The projections are solid and I am ready to break ground today. Let us get this done. He reached into his jacket, pulled out his expensive fountain pen, and uncapped it. I held my breath in the penthouse. Beside me, Leo stood perfectly still, his eyes locked on the monitor. Derek did not read a single paragraph. He did not check the default conditions. He did not look at the asset seizure protocols. Blinded by arrogance and his toxic obsession with proving he was superior to me, he just started signing. I watched the pen scratch across the signature lines. Page after page, he legally bound himself to absolute ruin. He signed away his career. He signed away his future. He signed away the very house my parents slept in. When he reached the final page, he offered a bold theatrical flourish on the signature line. He pushed the contract back across the glass table to Veronica, looking like a conquering king. Veronica reviewed the signatures, maintaining her cold, professional mask. She stood up and extended her hand. "Welcome to Vanguard Capital, Derek. The funds will be wired to your business account by close of business today. We expect great things from Iron Crest." Derek shook her hand vigorously. "You are backing a guaranteed winner," he promised, his voice dripping with arrogance. I watched the camera feed as Derek left the boardroom. The second the heavy wooden doors closed behind him, his rigid posture vanished. He practically skipped down the hallway toward the elevators. He pulled out his smartphone immediately, his thumbs flying across the screen. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was texting Madison, bragging that they were going to be filthy rich, that his genius business acumen had just secured $5 million, and that he had completely outsmarted everyone in Chicago. Back in the penthouse, the security feed cut to black. The heavy silence returned to the room. Leo slowly reached out and closed the lid of his laptop. A dark, terrifyingly satisfied smile crossed his face. He turned to me, his dark eyes gleaming with the thrill of a flawless victory. "We have him," Leo said softly. "Every single asset he touches is now legally ours." I picked up my teacup, taking a slow, steady sip. The warmth spread through my chest, chasing away the last lingering ghosts of the night. He threw me into the rain. Derek thought he had just secured the weapon he needed to bury me. He had no idea he had just eagerly, happily locked himself inside his own financial coffin. Now all we had to do was wait for him to start spending the money. And with Madison whispering in his ear, I knew it would not take long. While Leo and I watched the financial snare pull tight around Derek's neck, my sister-in-law Jasmine decided it was time to gather her own intelligence. Under the guise of helping with the lavish wedding preparations, she paid a visit to the sprawling, overpriced townhouse Derek and Madison were currently renting. Jasmine walked through the front doors carrying a bottle of expensive champagne and a stack of bridal magazines, playing the role of the supportive family member flawlessly. The townhouse was a monument to financial irresponsibility. Designer furniture with the price tags barely removed crowded the living room, and massive floral arrangements covered every available surface. Derek was already burning through the Vanguard Capital funds, completely oblivious to the fatal breach of his loan covenants. Madison was lounging on a velvet sofa, surrounded by catering menus and fabric swatches. She eagerly accepted the champagne, launching into a long, exhausting complaint about how stressful it was to plan a $150,000 wedding. She bragged to Jasmine that Derek had just secured a massive cash injection from elite investors, and because of his brilliant business acumen, they were upgrading the reception to include a caviar bar and a 12-piece orchestra. Jasmine smiled politely, nodding along while her sharp auditor eyes scanned the room. She was looking for financial documents, bank statements, anything that proved Derek was illegally diverting the commercial loan into personal wedding expenses. About 20 minutes into the visit, the doorbell rang. It was a courier requiring a signature for Madison's custom-imported silk napkins. Madison groaned dramatically, tossed her smartphone onto the kitchen island, and walked out to the foyer to deal with the delivery. Jasmine remained at the kitchen island, calmly sipping her champagne. That was when Madison's phone screen lit up with a new notification. Jasmine glanced down. It was a text message from a local women's health clinic confirming an upcoming appointment. But it was the preview text of the message that caught Jasmine's attention. The clinic was requesting an updated insurance card, noting that her policy had lapsed shortly after her routine annual physical last year. Jasmine frowned. The timeline was entirely wrong. A year ago, Madison claimed she was navigating a high-risk pregnancy and a subsequent traumatic miscarriage. She should have had dozens of specialized obstetric appointments on file, not just a routine annual physical. Jasmine listened to Madison arguing with the courier in the hallway. Knowing she only had a few minutes, Jasmine slipped away from the kitchen and moved silently down the hall to the home office. It was a chaotic mess of Derek's gym blueprints and Madison's wedding binders. Jasmine bypassed the wedding trash and went straight to the heavy oak desk in the corner. With the practiced efficiency of a corporate investigator, she began checking the drawers. The top two were unlocked and filled with basic office supplies. The bottom drawer was locked, but the key was carelessly tossed into a pen cup right on top of the desk. Madison and Derek were arrogant, but they were incredibly sloppy. Jasmine unlocked the drawer and pulled it open. Tucked underneath a stack of old bank statements was a thick, unmarked manila folder. She pulled it out and opened it on the desk. Inside was a collection of medical documents that completely rewrote the last year of my life. Jasmine quickly flipped through the pages. The first document was a blood test result from the exact same week Derek threw the divorce papers on my dining table. The week my parents kicked me out of my condo to protect their pregnant golden child. Jasmine looked at the HCG levels on the lab report. The numbers were absolute zero. The test was definitively negative. Madison had never been pregnant. Jasmine dug deeper, her heart pounding with a mix of disgust and triumph. Behind the blood test was a receipt from an online novelty website proving Madison had purchased fake positive pregnancy tests. There was another receipt for a customized fabricated ultrasound image generator. The final document in the folder was a printout of an online forum thread detailing exactly how to fake the symptoms of an early-term miscarriage, complete with highlighted paragraphs on how to manipulate a partner into staying out of guilt. The entire pregnancy, the supposed tragic miscarriage, the entire foundation of Derek and Madison's relationship was a massive, calculated lie. Madison had staged the entire thing just to force Derek to leave me and manipulate my parents into handing over my home. Once she secured the engagement ring and Derek's financial commitment, she conveniently miscarried to avoid producing an actual child. Jasmine did not waste a single second. She pulled out her phone and methodically photographed every single page in the folder. She captured the dates, the clinic letterheads, the receipts, and the highlighted internet printouts. She ensured every image was crystal clear and securely backed up to her cloud server. She placed the folder back exactly where she found it locked. The drawer dropped the key back into the pen cup and slipped out of the office. She walked back to the kitchen island just as Madison returned from the foyer, complaining loudly about the incompetence of delivery drivers. Madison picked up her phone, completely unaware that her entire house of cards had just been dismantled. She poured herself another glass of champagne and asked Jasmine which font she preferred for the wedding invitations. Jasmine offered a bright, perfectly composed smile. She pointed to an elegant cursive font, praised Madison's excellent taste, and casually mentioned that she had an urgent audit she needed to get back to. She hugged my sister, wished her the best with the wedding preparations, and walked out the front door. The moment Jasmine was safely inside her car, her professional facade dropped. She gripped the steering wheel, absolutely repulsed by the sheer depravity of what she had just uncovered. My parents had thrown me onto the freezing streets for a phantom baby. Derek had destroyed a 5-year marriage for a woman who treated him like a gullible bank account. Jasmine started the engine. Her eyes locked on the road ahead. She had the financial trap ready to snap shut, and now she held the explosive emotional detonator. She hit the gas and drove straight to my office. We had a war to finish. Jasmine bypassed the main lobby of Apex Elite, entirely using her temporary security clearance to take the private freight elevator directly to the executive mezzanine. I was sitting at my desk in the back office going over the quarterly margins with Leo when the heavy frosted glass doors slid open. Jasmine did not say hello. She marched straight into the center of the room, her expression a mask of absolute terrifying focus. She pulled her smartphone from her pocket, bypassed the security lock, and dropped the device flat on my glass desk. "Look at what I just found locked in your sister's home office," Jasmine said, her voice dropping to a low, furious register. I leaned forward and tapped the screen. Leo stepped up behind me, resting a hand on my shoulder as we both looked at the photo Jasmine had taken. It was a digital scan of a clinic lab report. The date at the top of the page matched the exact same week Derek had walked into my condo and thrown divorce papers on my dining table. The week my parents had forced me out into the freezing rain because they claimed Madison was carrying his child. I scanned the medical terminology, my eyes landing on the highlighted hormone levels. They were at absolute zero. The test was definitively negative. "Swipe left," Jasmine instructed coldly. I swiped. The next photo showed an online receipt for novelty fake positive pregnancy tests. I swiped again. Another receipt for a customized fabricated ultrasound image generator. The final photo was a printed internet forum thread containing highlighted instructions on how to fake the symptoms of an early-term miscarriage to manipulate a partner into staying out of guilt. I sat back in my chair. The air in the office felt suddenly very thin. The sheer calculated depravity of what I was looking at defied basic human comprehension. Madison had never been pregnant. The phantom baby that had cost me my marriage, my home, and my family was nothing but a prop. She had weaponized my parents' desperate desire for a grandchild to orchestrate my eviction. Derek had thrown away a 5-year marriage, ruined my credit, and destroyed my life for a woman who manipulated him with a fake baby. And my parents were currently draining their entire retirement fund to finance his revenge gym out of blind loyalty to that exact same lie. I felt a surge of absolute disgust wash over me. It was not heartbreak. I was completely past the point of shedding tears over Derek or my family. It was pure icy revulsion. "She faked the whole thing to secure the engagement ring and force him to leave you," Jasmine explained, pacing the length of the office. "Once she locked down his financial commitment and they moved into the townhouse, she conveniently staged a miscarriage so she would not actually have to produce a child. Derek has absolutely no idea. He thinks he lost a baby. My parents think they lost a grandchild. Madison has been playing all of them for absolute fools." Leo stared at the phone screen, his jaw clenched so tightly a muscle ticked in his cheek. He looked down at me, his dark eyes burning with a fierce, protective anger. "This goes beyond financial sabotage, Hannah. This is psychological warfare." I picked up the phone, staring at the receipts. "It is the final piece of the puzzle," I said, my voice eerily calm. "This is the detonator." Jasmine nodded, walking back to the desk. "Madison is currently sitting in her living room drinking champagne and bragging about spending $150,000 on a wedding. She told me Derek just secured a massive influx of cash from elite investors, and they are upgrading to a caviar bar and a 12-piece orchestra." Leo let out a sharp, dark laugh. He walked over to the digital whiteboard on the wall and picked up a marker. "He is using the Vanguard Capital loan," Leo stated, drawing a swift line down the center of the board. The bridge loan was strictly earmarked for commercial construction and gym operations. If he is funneling corporate funds into personal wedding vendors, he is actively breaching the financial covenants of the contract. Jasmine crossed her arms, her auditor instincts fully engaged. "He is arrogant and he is sloppy. He thinks because Vanguard is a private venture firm, nobody is auditing his daily ledgers. If you track the outgoing wire transfers from the business account you set up for him, I guarantee you will find payments routed to bridal boutiques and caterers." Leo immediately moved to the conference table and opened his laptop. He initiated a secure video call. Within seconds, the screen split into 3 grids displaying Veronica and the rest of his elite corporate legal team. "Veronica," Leo said, skipping any introductions. "I need an immediate forensic trace on the Vanguard Capital account assigned to Derek. Track every outgoing wire transfer from the moment the $5 million hit his ledger. Cross-reference the payees against commercial construction vendors. If you find a single dollar diverted to a personal event planner, a jeweler, or a catering company, I want the transaction flagged and locked as a material breach of contract." Understood, Veronica replied, her fingers already flying across her keyboard. What is the execution timeline on the default notice? Do you want his accounts frozen today? No, I interrupted, stepping into the frame of the camera. Leo looked at me, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face as he yielded the floor to me. We do not freeze his accounts today, I told the legal team. We let him spend the money. We let him sign the catering contracts, build the gym, and invite the entire city to his grand opening. I pulled up my own tablet, bringing up the aggressive social media campaign Derek had been running for his rival facility. He had plastered the opening date of Iron Crest all over the internet. He was throwing a massive red carpet gala in exactly 3 weeks, heavily promoting the attendance of his supposed angel investors. He was planning to use the night to publicly establish his dominance in the Chicago fitness market and humiliate me by proxy. We trigger the default acceleration clause on the exact night of his grand opening. I instructed, my voice hard and absolute. Veronica, I want the asset seizure notices drafted, signed, and ready for deployment. I want the foreclosure papers for my parents' house finalized. We wait until he is standing on that stage at the absolute peak of his arrogance, surrounded by every wealthy client he is trying to impress. Veronica smiled through the monitor. A public execution. Consider it done, Hannah. We will have the legal team standing by to serve him the paperwork the moment you give the signal. The call disconnected. I stood in the center of the sleek, quiet office looking at Leo and Jasmine. The war room was officially closed. The trap was set, the financial guillotine was sharpened, and Jasmine had just handed me the emotional equivalent of a nuclear bomb. Derek thought he was a brilliant mastermind orchestrating my downfall. He had absolutely no idea that in 3 weeks I was going to walk into his building, look him dead in the eye, and take away everything he had ever cared about. 3 weeks later, the crisp Chicago evening air buzzed with the manufactured hype of Derek's grand opening. He had named his facility Iron Crest, and true to his arrogant nature, he had completely ignored the strict financial covenants of his Vanguard Capital loan. He had blown a grotesque amount of the commercial budget on pure pageantry. A massive red carpet stretched across the sidewalk, flanked by velvet ropes and hired photographers. Inside, a 12-piece orchestra played classical covers of pop songs, and waitstaff circulated with silver trays loaded with beluga caviar and vintage champagne. Custom ice sculptures, shaped like dumbbells, slowly melted under harsh violet strobe lights. It was not a gym opening. It was a monument to his fragile ego. I stepped out of Leo's town car, smoothing the lines of my emerald green tailored dress. Leo stood beside me, looking devastatingly sharp in a bespoke black tuxedo. We did not sneak in through the back doors or try to blend into the shadows. We walked right up the red carpet, our posture radiating absolute power. The interior of Iron Crest was a chaotic imitation of my own business model, but it lacked any refined soul. Derek had clearly rushed the construction, covering cheap drywall with expensive imported marble facades that already looked uneven. Near the center of the main training floor, which had been converted into a massive dance floor for the night my parents were holding court, Thomas and Catherine were practically glowing with misplaced pride. I watched my father aggressively shake hands with a local politician, loudly bragging about his son-in-law's visionary business acumen. My mother was showing off a new diamond tennis bracelet undoubtedly purchased with the funds Derek had siphoned from their retirement accounts. We moved through the crowd. People began to turn and stare. Many of the guests were Chicago socialites and business executives who already held memberships at Apex Elite. They recognized me immediately. A ripple of whispered conversations spread across the room, parting the sea of guests, as Leo and I made our way toward the center of the gala. It did not take long for Derek to spot me. He was standing by a massive tiered champagne fountain with Madison clinging to his arm. Madison was dripping in designer silk and diamonds, looking every bit the triumphant trophy wife she had manipulated her way into becoming. When Derek saw me, his eyes widened for a fraction of a second before his customary arrogant smirk snapped into place. He actually thought he had won. He genuinely believed that my presence at his grand opening was a concession of my defeat. Derek detached himself from the fountain and marched directly toward us, a crystal flute of champagne balanced in his hand. Madison trailed right behind him, her heels clicking loudly against the marble floor. Derek looked me up and down, letting out a loud, mocking laugh that drew the attention of the surrounding guests. He asked if I had come to take notes on how to run a real luxury facility. He projected his voice intentionally performing for the crowd. He told me it was brave of me to show up and witness my own obsolescence in person. Madison chimed in, her voice dripping with artificial pity. She told me it was sad that I felt the need to crash their special night just to grasp at relevance. She leaned against Derek, resting her hand on his chest, and loudly proclaimed that some people simply could not handle being replaced by superior talent. I did not flinch. I did not break eye contact. I offered them both a calm, serene smile that seemed to momentarily confuse them. I told Derek I would not miss this night for anything in the world. Derek sneered, stepping closer, trying to use his height to intimidate me. He puffed out his chest, the expensive fabric of his suit pulling tight. He boasted that Iron Crest was already projected to corner the entire market. He loudly announced that his angel investors, the brilliant minds at Vanguard Capital, were arriving at any moment. He bragged that they were going to raise a glass to his success, and then discussed the strategy for acquiring and liquidating Apex Elite by the end of the year. Leo stood quietly by my side, perfectly relaxed, letting Derek dig his grave as deep as he possibly could. Derek barely acknowledged Leo, completely blinded by his obsession with humiliating me. He kept talking, telling me that I was out of my league, that my little warehouse project was a fluke, and that real power belonged to men who knew how to secure massive institutional backing. I listened to him gloat. I watched my parents hovering a few feet away, sporting identical condescending smirks, reveling in what they thought was my ultimate humiliation. They thought they were untouchable. They thought the $2 million they had mortgaged against their home was currently securing their place at the top of the Chicago social hierarchy. They had no idea they were standing in a building built entirely on a trap. Derek checked his heavy gold watch, complaining loudly that his investors were running late, but assuring the crowd that billionaires operated on their own schedules. He told me I should probably leave before they arrived, claiming he did not want my desperate energy ruining the mood when the real executives took the stage for his toast. I took a slow sip of my sparkling water. I looked at Madison's smug face, then locked eyes with Derek. I told him he was absolutely right about one thing. Billionaires do operate on their own schedules, and his investors were not running late at all. I smiled, feeling the absolute weight of the snare ready to snap shut, and told him the guests of honor were already standing right in front of him. Derek stared at me for a long, quiet second before throwing his head back and letting out a loud, theatrical bark of laughter. He actually slapped his knee, treating my statement like the desperate, pathetic punchline of a delusional woman. He looked at Madison, shaking his head in mock pity. He told me that my jealousy was officially bordering on a psychological breakdown, and he suggested I grab a complimentary glass of tap water before security escorted me out. He did not believe a single word I had just said. His mind simply could not comprehend a reality where I possessed more power than him. Dismissing me completely. Derek straightened his expensive suit jacket, grabbed Madison by the hand, and marched toward the center stage. He gestured sharply to the 12-piece orchestra, cutting off the classical music. The sudden silence in the massive room drew everyone's attention. Derek picked up a silver microphone from a stand, tapping it twice. The sharp feedback echoed off the cheap imported marble walls. Thomas and Catherine immediately pushed their way to the front of the crowd, standing dead center with their phones out, ready to record their golden son-in-law. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Derek boomed into the microphone, his voice dripping with unearned confidence. He paced the edge of the stage, soaking in the attention of the Chicago socialites and business executives. "We are standing in the future of the fitness industry. Iron Crest is not just a gym. It is a testament to vision, to aggressive business strategy, and to knowing exactly what this city needs." He paused, his eyes finding me in the crowd. A nasty, vindictive smirk crossed his face. "But building an empire requires making hard choices." Derek continued, his tone turning sharp and targeted. "It requires cutting out the dead weight. It requires knowing when to walk away from people who hold you back, people who lack the drive and the intellect to succeed. Tonight is about leaving past failures exactly where they belong, in the past. Madison beamed, leaning against the stage and clapping loudly. Thomas and Catherine joined in, nodding in smug agreement. Several guests, sensing the uncomfortable, petty nature of the speech, exchanged confused glances. Derek raised his crystal flute of champagne high into the air. I want to raise a glass to my beautiful bride-to-be Madison. And I want to make a very special toast to my angel investors at Vanguard Capital. They recognize superior talent. They provided the capital to make this dream a reality, and I know they are going to be thrilled with the returns. To Iron Crest. A few scattered polite claps rippled through the room. Beside me, Leo handed his sparkling water to a passing waiter. He adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke tuxedo, offered me a single predatory wink, and began walking through the parted crowd. He moved with the effortless, silent grace of a man who owned everything he surveyed. Derek was still holding his glass high when Leo ascended the short flight of stairs to the stage. Derek frowned, lowering his arm. He looked at Leo with a mixture of annoyance and confusion, clearly assuming another guest had drank too much, and wandered up to the podium. "Excuse me, pal," Derek muttered, covering the microphone with his hand, but still speaking loud enough for the front row to hear. "The bar is in the back. You need to get off the stage." Leo did not slow his pace. He walked directly up to Derek and smoothly, firmly pulled the silver microphone right out of his hand. Derek was so caught off guard by the sheer physical authority of the movement that his fingers simply released it. Leo turned to face the silent, captive audience. "Good evening, everyone," Leo said, his deep, resonant voice commanding absolute attention. Since Derek was just kind enough to toast his brilliant investors, I felt it was only appropriate that I introduce myself. My name is Leo. I am the sole owner, founder, and chief executive officer of Vanguard Capital. A collective shocked murmur swept through the room. The venture capitalists and corporate lawyers in the crowd recognized Leo instantly. They knew exactly who he was, and they knew his reputation for ruthlessness. Derek froze. All the arrogant color violently drained from his face. He stared at Leo, his mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. He looked from Leo to me, standing calmly in the crowd, and the horrifying reality of my earlier warning finally crashed down on him. "You?" Derek stammered, stepping backward. "You are Vanguard, but you are Hannah's boyfriend." Leo ignored him completely, keeping his focus on the crowd. Vanguard Capital provided Derek with a $5 million commercial bridge loan to construct this facility, Leo announced calmly, pacing the exact same path Derek had just walked. But Vanguard has extremely strict financial covenants. That capital was designated exclusively for commercial construction equipment acquisition and payroll. Leo stopped pacing. He looked down at the massive melting ice sculpture of a dumbbell. He looked at the waitstaff carrying silver platters of beluga caviar. He gestured toward the 12-piece string orchestra sitting nervously in the corner. "Our contracts include a zero-tolerance acceleration clause." Leo continued, his voice turning ice-cold. "If a borrower diverts a single cent of commercial funding to finance personal vanity projects, the loan is instantly breached." Thomas and Catherine stopped recording. My mother's phone slowly lowered to her side. Madison looked wildly between Derek and Leo, completely failing to grasp the financial terminology, but sensing the impending disaster. Derek lunged forward, panic completely overtaking him. He reached for the microphone, his hands trembling violently. "Wait, Leo, we can talk about this. The catering was a marketing expense. It is a promotional write-off. You cannot do this right now." Leo easily sidestepped Derek's desperate grab. He turned to face my ex-husband, directly holding the microphone so every single guest could hear the execution. "There is nothing to talk about," Derek Leo stated with brutal, uncompromising finality. "By using Vanguard funding to finance your wedding vendors, this orchestra, and this lavish party, you have committed a material breach of contract. You did not read the fine print. As of this exact moment, your loan is in default. The entire $5 million balance is called due immediately." Derek dropped to his knees. The crystal champagne flute slipped from his fingers, shattering against the marble floor. The sharp sound of breaking glass echoed like a gunshot through the dead, silent room. He knelt in the spilled champagne, gasping for air, staring up at the man who had just legally systematically dismantled his entire fake empire in under 3 minutes. The heavy silence following the shattering of the champagne glass lasted only a few seconds before Madison decided to take control. She could not grasp the complex financial terminology Leo had just deployed, but she absolutely understood the threat of social humiliation. She stepped right over the broken crystal, her designer gown sweeping through the spilled alcohol, and marched toward the edge of the stage. She pointed a trembling manicured finger directly at me. "You are a monster!" Madison screamed, her voice echoing through the cavernous gym. She whipped around to face the audience of stunned executives and socialites, instantly shifting into her favorite well-rehearsed role. She forced tears to well up in her eyes, letting out a dramatic, breathy sob. "Look at what she is doing!" Hannah could not stand that Derek chose me over her. She could not stand that we were building a beautiful life together. She has been bullying us for a year, harassing us, trying to ruin our business out of pure bitter jealousy. She reached up and wiped a perfectly timed tear from her cheek, playing to the empathy of the wealthy crowd. "She caused me so much stress. She caused me so much agonizing pain that I lost my baby. You are attacking a grieving mother." A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Playing the victim of a miscarriage was the ultimate untouchable manipulation. It was a sacred tragedy, and Madison was wielding it like a heavy shield. My parents, Thomas and Catherine, instantly rushed forward from the front row. Catherine wrapped her arms protectively around Madison, glaring up at me with absolute, unfiltered hatred. Thomas yelled that I had finally crossed an unforgivable line and demanded that Leo and I leave the premises immediately. I did not defend myself. I did not take a single step backward. I did not need to. A sharp, clear voice cut through the rising tension in the room. "Actually, the only thing Hannah caused you to lose was your grip on reality." The crowd parted as Jasmine stepped forward. She looked flawless in a tailored burgundy pantsuit, holding her smartphone in one hand. She did not look angry. She looked like a predator who had finally cornered her prey. Jasmine walked with deliberate purpose, bypassing the stage entirely and heading straight for the audiovisual control podium situated near the massive digital display walls. The hired technician working the booth was too bewildered by her absolute confidence to stop her. Jasmine reached over the soundboard, unplugged the primary display cable, and connected it directly to her phone. The towering wraparound digital screens that had been looping the silver Iron Crest logo suddenly flickered. The screens went pitch black for a fraction of a second before illuminating the entire gala floor with a massive high-resolution image. It was a medical clinic lab report blown up to 20 feet tall. Jasmine walked up the side steps of the stage. Leo smoothly handed her the silver microphone, stepping back to stand beside me. "May I have your attention, please?" Jasmine said, her voice ringing out with the crisp, undeniable authority of a senior corporate auditor. "What you are looking at is a verified blood panel from the exact same week Derek demanded a divorce from my sister-in-law. It is the same week Madison claimed she was carrying his child. I direct your attention to the highlighted hormone levels on the screen." Jasmine tapped her phone. A bright yellow circle appeared around the HCG levels on the massive displays. "They are at absolute zero," Jasmine stated clearly. "The test is definitively negative. Madison was never pregnant. There was no baby." Madison froze in my mother's arms. The fake tears instantly dried up, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated panic. She opened her mouth to scream that the documents were fake, but Jasmine was already moving to the next slide. Jasmine swiped her screen. The giant displays changed, flashing a digital receipt from a novelty website. "This is the receipt for the fake positive pregnancy tests she purchased 2 days before the divorce was announced." Jasmine announced, her voice echoing off the marble floors. She swiped again. Another massive image filled the room. "This is the transaction record for a customized fabricated ultrasound generator," Jasmine continued relentlessly. "And finally, my personal favorite." Jasmine swiped one last time. The screens displayed a series of printed internet forum threads. Sections of the text were heavily highlighted in bright yellow ink. These are step-by-step instructions on how to fake the symptoms of an early-term miscarriage, Jasmine read aloud, ensuring every wealthy guest heard the words. It includes detailed tips on how to manipulate a wealthy partner into staying out of guilt after the phantom baby is conveniently lost. The silence that descended on the grand opening gala was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating quiet born of pure revulsion. The venture capitalists, the local politicians, the elite socialites all stared at the 20-foot-high receipts and medical records. A collective gasp of disgust rippled through the crowd. People physically took steps back, distancing themselves from Madison as if she were carrying a contagious disease. These were individuals who built empires on trust and vetting. Seeing this level of calculated psychotic fraud turned their stomachs. Catherine slowly let go of Madison. My mother stepped away, her hands trembling as she stared up at the massive, undeniable proof of her golden child's depravity. The entire justification for kicking me out into the freezing rain, the phantom grandchild they had leveraged their house to protect, had never existed. Thomas covered his mouth with his hand, looking physically ill as he realized he had mortgaged his entire life for a lie. But the most catastrophic reaction belonged to Derek. He was still kneeling on the marble floor in the puddle of spilled champagne. He slowly turned his head, his eyes tracking up to the massive digital screens. He read the receipts. He read the dates. He stared at the highlighted forum posts teaching women how to trap a man with a fake tragedy. The realization hit him with the destructive force of a freight train. He had thrown away a loyal 5-year marriage. He had ruined his pristine career. He had committed multiple acts of severe financial fraud to try and ruin me. He had just signed away $5 million his business and his entire future. He had done all of it for a baby that was nothing more than an online novelty purchase. Derek slowly turned his head to look at Madison. All the arrogant, untouchable pride he had carried for the last year completely vanished, replaced by an expression of profound, agonizing devastation. His face was entirely pale, his eyes wide and hollow. The ultimate lie had broken his mind. He was looking at the woman he had destroyed his life for, and he finally saw her for exactly what she was. A parasite who had played him for an absolute fool. Derek scrambled up from the puddle of spilled champagne, his expensive suit soaked and clinging to his knees. The profound devastation in his eyes instantly morphed into a frantic, manic desperation. He could feel the stares of Chicago's elite burning into his skin. He needed to change the narrative. He needed a distraction, anything to pull the attention away from the massive digital screens broadcasting his ultimate humiliation. He turned his back on Madison, completely ignoring her shrill demands for someone to fix the projector. Derek marched toward the massive marble-topped bar situated at the edge of the dance floor. He clapped his hands together with a hollow, booming sound, forcing a terrifyingly bright smile onto his face. "Listen, everyone!" Derek shouted, his voice cracking slightly as it echoed across the silent room. "Let us not let a little personal drama ruin a historic night. The drinks are on me. Open the reserve cabinets. I want vintage champagne poured for every single guest in this building right now. Put it on the corporate tab." The head bartender, a seasoned hospitality professional who had seen his fair share of corporate meltdowns, did not reach for a single bottle. He stood perfectly still, looking at Derek with a mixture of profound pity and absolute disdain. The bartender pulled a small black point-of-sale terminal from behind the counter and set it on the marble top. "I cannot do that, sir," the bartender stated, his voice carrying easily into the quiet crowd. Derek slammed his hand against the bar. "I am the owner of this facility, and I am telling you to pour the champagne. Run the corporate card on file." "I just did," the bartender replied flatly. It declined. Derek froze. He reached into his soaked jacket, his fingers fumbling as he pulled out his sleek metal business credit card. He tossed it onto the marble. "Run it again. Your machine is malfunctioning." The bartender picked up the card, swiped it through the terminal, and turned the screen so Derek could see the glaring red text. "The decline is permanent, sir. Your issuing bank just locked the account. In fact, the catering manager was just notified that the initial deposit for tonight's event was reversed due to insufficient funds. We are packing up the bar." A low collective murmur of shock rippled through the venture capitalists and socialites. Financial ruin was a language they all spoke fluently, and watching a man's corporate credit instantly evaporate in front of them was the ultimate social death sentence. Derek stared at the red text on the screen, his breathing becoming shallow and erratic. He pulled out a personal platinum card, then another, throwing them onto the counter in a blind panic. Before the bartender could even swipe them, the heavy glass entrance doors of Iron Crest swung open with a resounding crash. The cold Chicago wind swept into the lobby, heralding the arrival of an entirely different kind of storm. Veronica, the lead attorney from Vanguard Capital, marched onto the gala floor. She looked utterly flawless in a razor-sharp trench coat flanked by 4 towering men in dark suits carrying thick leather briefcases. They moved with the terrifying synchronized precision of a corporate execution squad. They bypassed the security desk, ignored the murmuring guests, and walked directly toward the bar. Derek turned around, his eyes widening in pure terror as he recognized the woman who had smiled at him across the glass table just weeks ago. Veronica, Derek gasped, his voice trembling. "You need to call the bank. There is a misunderstanding with the bridge loan. Someone froze my corporate accounts." "There is no misunderstanding," Derek, Veronica said smoothly, stopping 3 feet away from him. She did not offer her hand. She signaled to one of the men beside her. He unclasped his briefcase, pulled out a massive stack of legal documents bound in thick red tape, and shoved them squarely into Derek's chest. Derek reflexively caught the heavy stack, clutching it like a shield. "Those are your official notices of default, asset seizure, and immediate foreclosure," Veronica announced, her voice projecting with absolute chilling clarity. "As Leo explained moments ago, you diverted commercial funds to pay for this absurd party. You violated the core financial covenants of your loan. Vanguard Capital executed the acceleration clause 15 minutes ago." Derek stared down at the red tape, his hands shaking so violently the papers rustled against his jacket. "You cannot just take the business. I have rights. I have a cure period." "You waived your right to a cure period when you signed the master agreement without reading the fine print." Veronica countered, her smile freezing the air around them. "You do not own this business anymore, Derek. As of this exact second, Vanguard Capital holds the legal deed to this building, the titles to every piece of equipment on this floor, and the entirety of your defunct finance firm." Thomas and Catherine, who had been standing paralyzed near the stage, suddenly pushed their way through the crowd. My father's face was ashen, his eyes darting frantically between the legal team and his son-in-law. "Wait!" Thomas shouted, his voice cracking with rising panic. He pointed a shaking finger at Veronica. "You can seize his business, but you cannot touch our assets. We are separate guarantors." Veronica turned her sharp gaze to my parents. She pulled a single piece of paper from her coat pocket and held it up. It was a copy of the collateral agreement. "You signed a cross-collateralization guarantee," Thomas, Veronica explained with surgical precision. "You leveraged your primary residence and liquidated your retirement portfolios to secure his bridge loan. Because Derek defaulted, your assets are forfeit. Vanguard Capital now legally owns your suburban estate. You have 72 hours to vacate the premises before the sheriff executes the eviction order." Catherine let out a piercing, horrified shriek. She stumbled backward, clutching her chest as if she had been physically shot. Thomas grabbed the edge of a cocktail table to keep from collapsing, his face turning a sickening shade of gray. The sprawling, perfect home they had spent 30 years maintaining, the ultimate symbol of their vanity and status, was gone. They were completely, utterly destitute. Derek stood trapped between the bartender packing up the unpaid liquor and the legal team possessing his entire life. The massive digital screens above the stage were still broadcasting the evidence of Madison's fake pregnancy, illuminating his total personal and professional annihilation. He looked down at the foreclosure notices in his trembling hands, the undeniable proof that his arrogant, toxic vendetta had just cost him absolutely everything. The heavy red legal folders trembled in Derek's hands as the devastating reality of his financial execution settled over the silent gala. Nobody moved. The venture capitalists, the socialites, and the politicians stood perfectly still, watching a man's entire existence unravel in a matter of minutes. The 12-piece orchestra remained frozen in the corner. The only sound in the massive marble-lined room was the ragged, panicked breathing of my ex-husband. Then a rhythmic, pulsing amber light sliced through the darkness outside. The flashing lights cut through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of Ironcrest, instantly drawing the attention of the entire crowd. Through the pristine glass, everyone had a front-row seat to the final humiliating act of Derek's corporate masquerade. A heavy-duty commercial tow truck was backing up to the curb right next to the red carpet. The driver, wearing a neon yellow safety vest, hopped out and began unfurling thick metal chains. He was walking directly toward a gleaming jet-black Porsche 911. It was the exact same sports car Derek had been shamelessly flaunting on social media for the past month, the ultimate symbol of his fabricated wealth and supposed success. Derek saw the tow truck driver loop the heavy chains around the front axle of the sports car. The legal paperwork slipped from his trembling hands, scattering across the marble floor. "No," Derek gasped, his voice cracking. "No, you cannot take the car. The lease is paid through the quarter." Veronica, standing just a few feet away, adjusted her immaculate trench coat. She did not even bother looking out the window. She kept her eyes locked on Derek, her expression one of utter corporate boredom. "The vehicle was leased under your defunct finance firm, Derek," Veronica stated, her voice projecting effortlessly across the silent room. "Since Vanguard Capital just executed a hostile takeover of all your corporate assets due to your loan default, we now own the lease. We canceled it 10 minutes ago. The car is being repossessed." Derek rushed toward the glass windows, pressing his hands against the cold pane. He slammed his palms against the reinforced glass, shouting at the tow truck driver, who could not hear a single word. The hydraulic winch engaged with a loud mechanical whine that penetrated the thick windows. The front tires of the beautiful, expensive Porsche lifted off the pavement. The wealthy guests behind Derek began to murmur. A few executives actually pulled out their smartphones, discreetly recording the magnificent collapse of a man who had spent the entire evening insulting their intelligence. They were watching the absolute dismantling of his ego piece by piece. Derek watched the tow truck pull his car away from the curb, merging into the dark Chicago traffic until the amber lights completely disappeared. He was stranded. He had no business, no money, no home, no car, and no reputation. He slowly turned away from the window. His eyes scanned the room, desperately searching for a lifeline. He looked at Thomas and Catherine, but my parents were entirely consumed by their own catastrophic ruin. My mother was sobbing hysterically into her hands, while my father leaned heavily against a cocktail table, looking as though he might need an ambulance. They did not even glance at Derek. They were completely broken by the realization that their toxic loyalty had cost them their estate. Derek looked at Madison. She was standing frozen near the melted ice sculpture, her designer gown stained with spilled champagne. She looked back at him not with love or support, but with the cold, calculating panic of a parasite realizing its host had just died. Finally, Derek looked at me. I was standing perfectly still beside Leo, my posture straight, my expression an impenetrable mask of calm. Derek took a shaky step toward me, then another. He moved like a man walking to the gallows. The wet, sticky champagne on his expensive trousers squelched with every step. The crowd parted instinctively, refusing to be anywhere near him. He stopped 2 feet in front of me. His face was slick with sweat, his eyes bloodshot and wide with absolute terror. Then in front of Chicago's elite, in front of the parents who had worshipped him, and the sister who had plotted with him, Derek physically collapsed. His knees hit the marble floor with a heavy thud, landing directly on top of the scattered foreclosure notices. He looked up at me, tears spilling over his lower eyelids, carving tracks through the sweat on his face. He reached out his trembling fingers, hovering just inches from the hem of my emerald dress, too terrified to actually touch me. "Hannah, please." Derek sobbed, his voice completely shattering. "Please, you have to stop this. You have to call them off. I made a mistake. I made a horrible, massive mistake." I looked down at him. I felt absolutely nothing. There was no lingering heartbreak, no pity, and no anger. He was just a pathetic, hollow man who had finally run out of lies. "She tricked me!" Derek cried, pointing a shaking finger back at Madison. She manipulated me, Hannah. She faked the pregnancy. She played with my mind. She made me think I had to leave you to do the right thing. I never wanted this. I never stopped loving you. You have to believe me. We had 5 years together. You are the only woman I ever actually wanted. Please, Hannah, give me another chance. I will do anything. He was begging. He was groveling on the floor of his own ruined empire, trying to use the ghost of our dead marriage to save himself from financial execution. I stared down at his tear-stained face. The silence in the room was so profound, I could hear the hum of the ventilation system overhead. I looked at this man who had thrown me out into the freezing rain, who had ruined my credit, who had tried to steal my business plan, and who had spent the last hour publicly mocking me. A sound bubbled up in my chest. It started low, building rapidly, until it could no longer be contained. I threw my head back and laughed. It was a loud, clear, genuinely joyful laugh. It was the sound of absolute, unfiltered release. The sheer absurdity of his desperation, the comedic perfection of his downfall, was the funniest thing I had ever witnessed. My laughter echoed through the grand marble hall, slicing through his pathetic tears. I stopped laughing and looked down at him, my eyes locking onto his, with ice-cold, devastating indifference. I crouched down slightly, picking up one of the heavy red foreclosure notices from the floor. I held it between my fingers, letting him see the bold black text, authorizing the seizure of his entire life. I tossed the thick packet directly at his chest. The heavy paper smacked against his soaked suit jacket and fell uselessly into his lap. "You said my sister was the one you really wanted," I said, my voice ringing out with crystal clarity, ensuring every single person in the room heard my final verdict. Enjoy her, and enjoy your $5 million of debt. I stood up straight, turning my back on him without a second glance. I slipped my hand into Leo's arm. The crowd instantly parted for us, clearing a wide, respectful path to the exit. We walked out of Ironcrest, leaving Derek sobbing on the floor, surrounded by the wreckage of his own toxic arrogance. The crisp Chicago night air hit my face the moment we crossed the threshold, offering a sharp, refreshing contrast to the suffocating atmosphere inside the gala. Leo and I stood under the glow of the street lamps, waiting in comfortable silence as the valet hurried to retrieve his car. We did not have to wait long to witness the immediate spectacular implosion of the people who had tried to destroy me. The heavy glass doors of Ironcrest burst violently open. Madison stormed out onto the concrete sidewalk, clutching her smartphone in one hand and hiking up the hem of her ruined designer gown with the other. The performative tears and the fragile victim routine had entirely vanished. Her face was set in a mask of pure calculating rage. She was furiously typing on her screen, frantically trying to secure a ride away from the epicenter of the disaster. Derek stumbled out the doors right behind her. He was a pathetic sight, his expensive suit clinging to his frame, damp with spilled champagne and sweat. He reached out with a trembling hand, catching the fabric of Madison's dress in a desperate attempt to stop her from walking away. Madison whipped around with lethal speed. She slapped his hand away so hard the sharp sound echoed down the quiet street. "Do not touch me!" she hissed, her voice vibrating with absolute disgust. Derek flinched, holding his hands up defensively. "Madison, please!" he begged, his voice cracking into a high, panicked whine. "You have to listen to me. I can fix this. I can declare bankruptcy. We can start over. I still have some connections in the industry. We can figure it out together." Madison let out a harsh, barking laugh that held absolutely no warmth. She looked him up and down, her eyes sweeping over his ruined suit, his pale, terrified face, and the empty valet stand where his repossessed Porsche used to be. "Start over with what?" she demanded, her voice dripping with sheer venom. "You have nothing, Derek. You are less than nothing. You just signed away $5 million that you do not have. You lost your firm. You lost the gym. You do not even have a car to drive me home in." Derek took a shaky step forward. "But we love each other. We built a life." "I built a lifestyle," Madison corrected him brutally, completely dropping the facade she had maintained for an entire year. I tolerated you because you had credit limits and a decent title. Do you honestly think I would have looked twice at you if I knew you were this incredibly stupid? You let Hannah and her billionaire boyfriend walk you right into a trap because you were too busy stroking your own ego to read a basic contract. A sleek black Uber pulled up to the curb, its hazard lights flashing. Madison grabbed the handle of the back door, but before she climbed inside, she turned back to face the man she had stolen from me. She reached down to her left hand and grabbed the massive custom diamond engagement ring Derek had purchased to flaunt his wealth. She yanked the ring off her finger. She did not hand it back to him gently. She threw it directly at his face. The heavy diamond struck his cheekbone and clattered onto the dirty concrete sidewalk, rolling into the gutter. "You are a broke, pathetic loser," Madison spat. "Do not ever contact me again." She climbed into the back of the car, slammed the door shut, and sped off into the night, leaving Derek completely alone on the curb. He dropped to his knees on the freezing concrete, frantically scraping his fingers against the pavement, desperately trying to find the discarded ring in the dark. Before he could even locate the diamond, the glass doors of the gym crashed open a second time. My parents stumbled out into the cold. Thomas and Catherine were hyperventilating, their faces flushed with a terrifying mixture of panic and unprecedented rage. The polished, affluent country club image they had spent 30 years cultivating was completely obliterated. They had just fully comprehended the reality of the cross-collateralization agreement. Thomas spotted Derek kneeling in the gutter. A guttural, furious roar ripped from my father's throat. He charged across the sidewalk, moving faster than I had seen him move in a decade. Thomas lunged at his golden son-in-law. He grabbed Derek by the lapels of his soaked suit jacket and violently yanked him up from the pavement. Derek let out a sharp cry of terror, holding his hands up to shield his face. "You ruined us!" Thomas screamed, spit flying from his lips as he shoved Derek backward against the brick exterior of the building. "You arrogant, stupid fraud. You told me it was a guaranteed return. You told me my assets were safe. They are taking my house, Derek. They are taking my entire retirement." Catherine was right behind him. My mother, the woman who had always prioritized social grace above all else, completely lost her mind. She shrieked, swinging her heavy designer handbag through the air. The bag struck Derek squarely in the shoulder, the heavy metal clasps tearing the fabric of his suit. She hit him again, sobbing hysterically. "You stole our home. You told us you were going to crush Hannah, and instead you handed her everything we own. You destroyed our lives." Derek cowered against the brick wall, weeping openly, trying to defend himself against the physical assault of the two people who had once treated him like a king. He tried to blame Madison, crying that she had tricked him, but Thomas just shook him harder, slamming him against the wall again, and screaming that Derek was the one who signed the dotted line. I watched the entire violent, pathetic brawl unfold from the passenger seat of Leo's car, which had just pulled up to the curb. I watched my toxic family members turn on each other, tearing themselves apart like starved animals fighting over a scrap of meat. The alliance they had formed to destroy me had shattered the exact second the money disappeared. I did not feel a single ounce of pity. I simply pressed the button to roll up my window, cutting off the sound of their screaming, and Leo drove us away into the quiet, peaceful night. The absolute destruction of their lives did not end on the sidewalk. 72 hours later, the strict terms of the eviction notice were enforced with ruthless corporate efficiency. Jasmine, who lived in the same suburban neighborhood, drove past my parents' sprawling estate and called to give me the final update. Vanguard Capital's asset management team had arrived at the property right on schedule, flanked by 2 local sheriff's deputies, to ensure compliance. Thomas and Catherine had spent the last 3 days frantically packing their belongings into heavy black trash bags because they could not afford to hire a moving company. Their credit accounts had been frozen by their own banks the moment news of the default hit the financial sector. Jasmine watched from her car as my parents dragged the garbage bags out onto the front lawn. The beautiful, pristine suburban home they had prized above their own daughter was officially seized. The locks were changed and a heavy padlock was secured across the front door. Thomas sat on the curb next to the trash bag, staring blankly at the street, a completely broken man. Catherine paced the driveway, weeping uncontrollably, realizing she had absolutely nowhere to go. Madison had blocked their numbers entirely, refusing to associate with them now that they had no wealth to offer her. They had gambled their entire existence on the toxic desire to see me fail. The house, the money, and the reputation they valued so highly were gone. They had completely destroyed themselves, and I had not had to lift a single finger. 6 months later, the crisp autumn wind swept across the pristine waters of Lake Geneva, carrying with it the undeniable scent of absolute peace. The private sprawling estate Leo had secured for the weekend was a sanctuary of stone glass and rich mahogany nestled quietly against the shoreline. Far away from the noise and relentless hustle of Chicago, the dust from the explosive collapse of my toxic family had finally permanently settled. The financial and social wreckage they left behind was catastrophic, but I watched it unfold from a comfortable, untouchable distance. Derek was currently spending his days trapped in the fluorescent windowless misery of federal bankruptcy court. The merciless legal team at Vanguard Capital had systematically stripped him down to his absolute foundation. His defunct finance firm was liquidated, his bank accounts were drained to cover the astronomical legal fees, and his professional reputation was so thoroughly destroyed that no reputable firm in the city would even allow him in their lobby. At 32 years old, the arrogant, flashy director who had thrown me into the freezing rain was completely finished. Madison was facing a completely different, yet equally poetic brand of torture. Without my parents' stolen wealth to float her lavish lifestyle, and with Derek entirely bankrupted by his own predatory loan, my sister had crashed hard into the unforgiving pavement of reality. At 26, with no college degree, no marketable skills, and a publicly ruined reputation, the golden child of the family was currently working a minimum-wage retail job. She spent her days wearing a stiff polyester uniform, folding clothes in a discount outlet mall, standing on her feet for 8 hours a day while dealing with demanding, rude customers. She had traded her dream of a crystal-studded wedding gown for a plastic name tag. I sat at the vanity in the master suite of the Lake Geneva estate, looking at my reflection in the gilded mirror. A makeup artist had just finished pinning my hair into an elegant sweeping updo. My phone resting on the smooth marble counter suddenly vibrated. The screen lit up with a barrage of rapid-fire text messages. They were from Thomas and Catherine. My parents had spent the last few months living in a cramped, miserable rental apartment on the far outskirts of the city, their sprawling suburban estate long gone. The messages rolling across my screen were steeped in pure, unfiltered desperation. "Hannah, please," the first text read. "We have absolutely nothing left for our retirement. We made a terrible mistake trusting Derek. He ruined us." A second message appeared seconds later. "We are your parents. You have a successful business. You have the means to help us. Please, we are begging you to forgive us. We can be a family again." I stared at the glowing screen. A year ago, the thought of my parents begging for my forgiveness would have sparked a whirlwind of complicated emotions. But today, reading their pathetic, manipulative words, I felt absolutely nothing but a profound, liberating emptiness. They were not sorry for how they had treated me. They were not sorry for kicking me out of my condo for a phantom baby or for funding a smear campaign against my business. They were only sorry that their malicious gamble had failed, and they were desperate for a new host to leech onto. I did not type out an angry reply. I did not demand an apology or throw their past cruelty in their faces. I simply smiled a genuine, completely peaceful smile and pressed the block button on both of their contact profiles. The digital cord was permanently severed. They were no longer my problem. The heavy oak door of the suite clicked open, and Jasmine walked into the room. My sister-in-law looked absolutely breathtaking in a sleek floor-length emerald gown that perfectly complemented her rich, dark skin. She carried 2 crystal flutes of vintage champagne, her sharp, perceptive eyes taking in my relaxed posture and the silenced phone on the counter. "You blocked them?" Jasmine asked, her lips curving into a knowing, triumphant smile. "Forever," I replied, accepting the champagne glass she handed me. Jasmine clinked her glass against mine. "To taking out the trash and building an empire." We drank the champagne, sharing a look of absolute solidarity. Jasmine was the only member of my past life who was standing beside me today. She had been the one to rescue my business plan, the one to uncover Madison's psychotic lies, and the one who had seen my true worth when my own blood relatives had treated me like dirt. Having her serve as my maid of honor was the easiest decision I had ever made. When the time came, I walked out of the master suite and descended the grand staircase of the estate. The afternoon sun cast a warm golden glow over the manicured lawn leading down to the edge of the lake. There were no hundreds of performative guests. There were no toxic family members looking for a free meal or an opportunity to judge me. The seating was intimate, filled only with the close friends, loyal business partners, and genuine allies who had supported Leo and me throughout the year. At the end of the aisle, standing under a beautiful floral archway overlooking the water, was Leo. He looked incredibly handsome in a classic black tuxedo, his dark eyes fixed entirely on me. There was a quiet, unshakable power in the way he looked at me, a deep foundation of mutual respect and fierce loyalty that Derek could never have comprehended. I walked down the aisle to the soft acoustic melody of a solo guitarist. Every step I took was a victory lap. I had started this journey with a single suitcase in the freezing rain, burdened by severe debt and a shattered heart. Today, I was the sole owner and CEO of Apex Elite, a multi-million-dollar fitness empire that commanded the respect of the entire city. Leo took my hands as I reached the altar. His grip was warm and steady. We exchanged vows that we had written ourselves, promising not just love, but absolute partnership in every battle and every triumph to come. When he kissed me, the small crowd erupted into genuine, joyful applause. Later that evening, as the reception hummed with music and laughter, I stepped out onto the private stone terrace. The cool autumn breeze rushed off the surface of Lake Geneva. Leo stepped out behind me, wrapping his strong arms around my waist and pulling me back against his chest. I leaned into him, looking out over the dark, tranquil water. I thought about the broken woman I had been a year ago, and I marveled at the ruthless, untouchable powerhouse I had become. The toxic anchors of my past were entirely destroyed, and my future was a wide-open, glittering horizon. I was finally free, utterly triumphant, and completely in control of my own empire. The most profound lesson from this journey is that betrayal, while devastating, can be the ultimate catalyst for discovering your true power. When the people who are supposed to protect you try to tear you down, it forces you to stop relying on their validation. Losing everything in a single night taught me that my true worth was never tied to my marriage or my family's conditional approval. Instead of letting their deceit destroy me, I used that sharp pain as fuel to build an empire from the ground up. True victory is not about screaming matches or sinking to their level of toxicity. It is about outgrowing them entirely and creating a life so magnificent that their opinions no longer matter. When someone shows you they do not value you, believe them and invest your energy into yourself. Please share your comeback story and comment below.